Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about various magical gatherings. And this week we actually have a very special magical gathering happening in Seattle. We're actually going to be talking about the Pro Tour today, so I'm definitely excited. My name's Graham, I go by HamHawks42, and I'm joined by a couple of other lovely gentlemen, members of Team MagicJank. First up, we got Damien F16. Damien, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you, Ham?
Doing well, man. Doing well. And then we also have Carlo, a.k.a. CFavretto_Jr. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
No complaints. No complaints. So here we are. We have Thunder Junction now live in Standard, and we have a Pro Tour. And this is our first opportunity to see the new cards in action in Standard as well as Draft. And I gotta say, I've had an eye on coverage. We're recording this actually at the tournament's still underway. We're in the middle of day 2 right now. Mm-hmm. So by the time you're listening to this, there's probably been all kinds of crazy, storylines and updates that we will not be covering for this show. But we want to talk about kind of high level, the format, what we're seeing so far, as well as some of the big storylines from day 1. And just get into it. So I'm curious, have you guys been watching or keeping up with the Pro Tour thus far?
I have, yeah. Day 1's in the books, right? So you guys watched day 1, I assume. And it was pretty great. The limited set, I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk too much about limited, probably not, but I just want to say it is a great limited set, and it's been really sweet watching the pros draft something that feels almost akin to a cube draft at the Pro Tour. You know, it's weird, but seeing crazy wild swingy bombs and, people opening Okos and all these kind of things, and that, as much as we complain about that, it is a sweet limited set. A lot of people like it, so that part's sweet, but the Constructed's been awesome as well. I know we have a lot to talk about, but before we jump in, Carlo, have you been watching as well, day 1? What do you think?
Yeah, I watched a lot of the Standard portion yesterday, and taking a look at not only Twitch chat's reactions, which, is another conversation for another time, but, a lot of folks, that are typically in my stream, we're actually calling it a snooze fest. And the reason
Really?
they were calling it a snooze fest was because of the amount of Esper midrange and not liking to watch the Esper midrange mirror. And, as I try to tell them, like I tell anybody, I said the pros are playing the best decks, what they view to be the best decks. Because it's true. It was like 31% of the field or something like this submitted Esper midrange. But if you look at all the lists, they're not the same.
Sure.
And I'm sure we'll get into this, but that was public enemy number 1 going into this Pro Tour. You knew that it was probably the best deck in Standard or the most consistent. So it was either play this deck or play a deck that you think has a great matchup against it and probably Boros Convoke. And you can see that was the second most submitted deck of this Pro Tour outside of the other category. So,
right.
Ain't nothing wrong with pro players playing the best decks possible.
100%.
And honestly, I think people are just whiny. I think if really bitching about Esper midrange seems ridiculous to me because what do you want? Blue-white control mirrors all day? We did that Standard a few years ago back when Dream Trawler was the best, that blue-white control. I mean, that's way worse. Or eggs or some horrible combo deck that doesn't even interact. It can be way worse. I think you're right. Everybody's sick of Rafine. Everybody's sick of, Atraxa and Leyline Bind and, a bunch of stuff. But I think one big reason we didn't see a lot of innovation in this Pro Tour is because they literally had 1 week to or I guess if they were proxying when the spoilers came out, by the time the full spoiler dropped, I think they had about 2 weeks to test or 2.5 weeks. That is not much time. And especially 11 set Standard, I mean, if the best decks are the best decks after 10 sets, how much impact is the 11th set in a pool that big really going to have? Now, we all looked at these cards, and it's wild how many mythics and everything got printed into this set. So, I mean, people were hoping, man, surely one of these random artifacts from the vault, the big score, is going to be great. but a lot of them were commander, build arounds. A lot of them are a lot of them are engineer pieces that probably take a lot of testing to figure out how do we create this shell that we've never tried to build before. It's so much easier to just default to Esper midrange. It is the best deck, even though right now the win rate it's seeing maybe not the greatest, but it's because there's so many players playing it as well. But they just get the best tools every single set. It was Deep Cavern Bat or Schooner before this, and now it's the Nathan Stoyer Invitational card, and it's just it's hard to go wrong. Domain as well. It's just so good. It just gets to pick up whatever random little thing because it plays 5 colors. It can shift around really easily. Making a deck that can beat Esper midrange and Boros Convoke and Domain and blue-white control, that's a tall order. And in 2 weeks, I think most pro players just said, let's just play the deck that we all know really well, that we know is good, and not try and get crazy. That said, one point about the top most played decks, you mentioned Esper in first with about 30% of the metagame share and Boros in second. And I thought it was definitely going to be Domain after that, but no, or Teamer Analyst and Domain third and fourth. But Domain in fifth, it was 4-color Legends in fourth, taking up 8.2% of the metagame. That is interesting because, even though it has, debuted a little bit in the hands of CFT Saki, winning that 75K and everything, I haven't seen it do really anything after that. There was maybe one, 4-color Slowgurk deck or a 3-color deck that got into the top 8 of one challenge, once. That was it. It wasn't just all over the place the way Teamer Fireballs was, right? The Teamer World Soul Rage deck. So, what do you think of this 4-color Legends jumping up? Do you think suddenly Honest Rutstein is good enough to put that deck into tier 1 or what?
I want to believe. I think I love that it's such. That is such a goofy deck. And I say that with all kinds of love. I mean, we're here hosting the MagicJank podcast, right? I think I want to let the people know, I don't mean this disparagingly at all. I love just how weird that deck is. I've gone up against it a couple of times on the ladder, and every time when I get beat by that, I'm happy. Because this was a fun game. I enjoy watching that deck beat me, which is not something I can say for pretty much everything else on this list. And that's something that I think is interesting. If a 4-color Legends deck is viable in the standard, I find it hard to say that the standard is bad. And the fact that we had 17 competitors at the Pro Tour level register that deck tells me that there's something to it. And I do think, Honest Rutstein, when you look at that card, it's got good stats for its size. It's good early. It's good late. I mean, I've wanted a Gravedigger effect to be viable in standard for a long time, and I think that card gets there. So I'm excited by it. I like it a lot, actually. So I'm hoping that's the truth. I hope that deck's real.
Yeah. I think it's good. Sorry, Carl, go ahead.
I would say, looking at that deck, it's actually, to me, the prime example of a fair deck. It's convoluted, yes. You need 5 or 6 pieces of the deck to come together to develop infinite mana or infinite Takanumas. But that's fair,
Yeah.
Yes, you can get a really big Slowgurk and you can attack. Yes, you could just bounce your whole opponent's, non-land permanents or whatever with Otawara. And you get to play infinite copies of these legendary lands. But it's a fair Magic deck. And so it's I'm not surprised that this type of a deck is doing well. I'm not sure each version, taking a look at each deck list individually, but this deck was also playing some amount of copies of Annie Joins Up to get double triggers. You probably have seen that on the ladder. I know Ali Eldrazi was playing it a lot. It is the enchantment that costs Naya colors, but it doubles the triggered abilities of your legendary creatures. And so, Slowgurk getting 2 counters is relevant, right? Or untapping Rona twice to get the draw discard abilities, which 2 cards off of the Rutstein, right? So it's a fair Magic deck in comparison to getting turn 3 by a slick shot show off or something
Right.
like this.
Well, it's a value deck, right? It
Yeah.
just has all these little, like, and people love that, just this incremental value and building and building and building, and it's like this snowball effect. And yeah, Annie joins up kind of pies into that. Now, I don't know if many people brought Annie joins up to the Pro Tour. I think most of these decks, there's a few different versions of this deck. Like Brian Kibler's playing a 5-color version that's playing like all the random legends. It was bizarre, like Kellen and multiple Kellens and
Human based,
human base, yeah, with because Plaza of Heroes is really the linchpin for that deck. You just can't. That deck couldn't exist without Plaza. Plaza's so good that he's getting away with it. I don't think he's doing very well, but I do think, like, back to what Ham said, Honest Rutstein is so good. It's weird how like pushed it is. I don't know why, but like no drawbacks, and that creature costing like 1 less. I remember playing with what was it, Heartless Summoning back in the day. Like we used to get drawbacks when they did that. Now it's just free on a 3/2 that also is a Gravedigger. Like wow,
and it's an uncommon, no less. Like it's
right,
yeah.
So that loop is really interesting. So yeah, the 4-color deck. I think is good, but again, the power, it doesn't have this power spike that the other decks have. You know what I mean? The ceiling is much lower. You're doing this grindy value thing. There's no big World Souls Rage. There's no big, huge, Atraxa from Domain. Like the other decks have a much higher ceiling, I think. So yeah, it's a tough deck to play well. So many triggers. I saw people missing triggers on camera at the feature match. People getting warnings for missing stuff, and it was interesting, but very difficult deck to play. I think if you do pick this up, make sure you get in a lot of reps.
And that's the benefit that we have of Arena and Magic Online.
Oh my goodness!
Is
practice.
They won't forget the triggers. They'll keep track of exactly how much mana you have and exactly what's the mana cost that you have to pay to cast a certain spell. We are very much so playing on those platforms, and we are privileged in doing so. And the downside, though, of like that 4-color deck is you have this timer that you have to hope to resolve everything you want to do in a certain amount of time before you run out, and so it truly doesn't make something like infinite. Unless your opponent scoops, anyway. But at least you could demonstrate this loop in paper and say, "Hey, yo, this is what's going on. We interacting or what?"
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a double-edged sword, right? Digitally, we get our hands held. The program holds your hand and says, you can't miss any triggers, you can't miss any blah, blah, blah. And if that's a crutch. Like, if you play too much on Arena and then you play in real life, like, tracking all that in real life is quite a task. And I think a lot of people who only practice on Arena, you got to make sure. But then the other side of that, like you said, the timer thing is hilarious, because on Arena, there's so much clicking. Oh, my God. Like, the next deck I want to talk about, the Teamer World Souls Rage deck, same thing. So much clicking. All the Nissa triggers and the analysts and the land triggers and all that stuff. It really, it's like going to time online is an issue. But like you said, in real life, it's just, I'm just going to like do all these things at the same time. Okay, I'm going to gain 8 life. I'm going to do, I don't have to resolve each one individually. But speaking of the one of the other top decks, I'd like to talk about the top decks here, and then we'll talk about, like, because there's some really spicy brews, but there's only 1 or 2 people playing these weird Orzhov, Bronco, and some of these mono black deck and everything.
Sure.
But Teamer Fireballs, going into this, I played a lot of the deck, and very quickly everybody said, okay, this is a real deck, and we've got to be ready for this. So people started packing Stonebrain. They started packing Unlicensed Hearse, and all kinds of, and then Rest in Peace gets printed. So for the last couple of weeks, I'm just running into Restless, Rest in Pieces and all this. And it was like, we were talking about this week. How can this deck is basically going to have a sideboard audible plan, like a juke into something totally different, because you just, they strip your World Souls Rage. You have like 1 doppelgang to still get out of it or whatever. But even that's not good enough. Like, they'll just, with the next thing, they'll strip that or whatever. And so you needed and we were saying, what about the sideboard into big creatures? And then the Pro Tour happens, and it was exactly the creatures we were saying. It was sideboard into Bonnie Paul, sideboard into Titan of Industry, and it's really sweet seeing these decks basically go, you're going to bring in all this hate. Look at my sideboard. The whole sideboard is hate. It is cards to beat their sideboard cards, like Tranquil Frillbacks and like Pick Your Poisons and Audible into a totally different game plan. It's like, Bonnie Paul's been very impressive. It puts so much power on the battlefield, and it's better than Titan because the power and toughness. That Ox is so big that there's like red can't get around it and other stuff. Whereas the Titan token dies to the Witchstalker Frenzy. Same with Bonnie Paul Yeah, she gets you so much value. It's crazy. What do you guys think of this Teamer Analyst deck? Is it
I love that strategy. The transformational sideboard is absolutely what this deck needs to be competitive in this kind of level. Because I know, again, like playing with it and going up against it, if the Unlicensed Hearth shows up, like on turn 2 or 3, that's game. You're done. Like the entire deck fails. Or getting set up, the big wombo combo with the Nissa and the Analyst just can't fire if the opponent knows what they're doing and is constantly removing your lands from your graveyard. Not impossible, but yeah, it's very, very tough to come back from. So I know, on pretty much all my standard brews these days, I just put 3 Hearths on the sideboard. My green decks have the frillbacks too, and we just call it a day. And it's like, you're absolutely going to blow me out in game 1, but I got you game 2 and 3 unless you pivot. And I'm glad to hear that the pros are doing this pivot, because that's huge. That having a backup plan that can generate enough value to win you the game because you have ramped, and ramping into big creatures, we all know that works. Like, it's just nice. Why not do that? Yeah.
Keyword large.
Yeah,
I dig it.
And we were talking about this card in particular, Bonnie Paul, last week's podcast with Headology, about how busted this card was in draft. So just for those of you who don't know what Bonnie Paul is yet. Bonnie Paul Clear Cutter is a 6-mana creature, right? It's a 6/5 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, you create Bow. Bow is this ox that has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. And whenever you attack, you draw a card. Then you can put a land from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. And that's relevant in this Temur deck that has a bunch of lands in the yard, right? So you get to play, one of those fetch lands from New Capenna that goes ahead and gets a basic, gains a life. Yada yada, and that makes Bo grow. This card is so powerful that even this morning before we started recording this podcast, I was watching the Legacy European Tour, which is modern right now, and there's the Amulet Titan deck that is actually playing Bonnie Paul in it now too.
Wow.
So what we thought was just like maybe this limited all-star is seen play in standard and in modern. That just shows you the strength of this card. And I wouldn't be surprised if we just start seeing like, I don't think that we see any type of like Simic midrange, but I don't think it's out of the ordinary to see like a Sultai midrange deck pop up in standard with some amount of Bonnie Paul in it for how strong it is.
I mean, to me, it's a gold Titan. It reminds me of the Titan cycle. It's a 6-mana card, but it's even better because you don't have to attack with it. Like so many times, like in Teamer Fireballs, you slam this and then just attack with your Nissa. Then like suddenly you get the land out of the yard. Nissa makes 2 mana, and then you cast cycle. It's like it's so much value and so much board presence for just like 6 mana, and it's rare. That's the worst part about limited. It should be mythic. Why is it rare? It shows up so much more often than it should in limited, which is really annoying. But it's a great one. I was pretty confident it was going to see play in standard, but modern, that surprises me. I did not know it was going to see play in modern, but Bonnie's been great. So the Teamer Analyst deck is very good, and now they have a solid sideboard plan, so it's pretty tough to like pin them down. I'm pretty sure other people were expecting them to do this, so I don't know how you sideboard in. I think you still sideboard your graveyard hate, because not being able to Analyst bring things back from the yard, like Rest in Peace, for example, out of Esper midrange is still backbreaking against them. And they have to rebuild from there and try and pick your poison on the Rest in Peace and then try and start filling the yard again, and it just slows them down so much. So the Analyst deck is solid. Rest in Peace, one of the big sideboard cards. If we jump to the top 2 decks here, Esper midrange and Boros Convoke, I know both of them. I think Boros is rocking Rest in Peace. They might still be playing Kutsil's Flanker, which kind of fits in with their plan a little bit better. But Esper midrange, they got 2 excellent sideboard. First, before we even get to the sideboard, the reason this deck is still the best deck, of course, it's got the highest skill ceiling, I think, for the pros especially. When you get to look at that many cards off her Fiend, and now Duelist of the Mind, both of them are just like churning through your deck. If you know what you're doing, you know exactly what you want in every situation, and you're one of these super high-level players, it lets you leverage that skill that other decks don't let you leverage. Like Boros, as a pro playing Boros, you're just kind of, did I win the die roll? Great. I'm probably 80% to win this game. And here's the nut draw. Okay, that's the advantage of playing Boros Convoke, and we'll get to that after this maybe. But Esper midrange, I'm not surprised to see a lot of the best players in the world play it. But it was interesting to see the build. So I thought Wedding Announcement looked really good right now, and I was expecting a lot of them to go back to Wedding Announcement in the main, and some did. But I think, like one team did, one team like Team Handshake did, but the other team, like I can't remember their names. There's Channel Fireball, Team Handshake. There's another big one. But anyway, one of them didn't, and they didn't like the wedding announcements. I thought, oh, that's interesting. But the other big changes were basically just the Nathan Stoyer card in the main deck, and in the sideboard, they got Pest Infestation, which was huge against Boros. That's such an incredible tool against Boros, and Bat Toxic if that comes up. Yeah,
sure.
And also getting those Rest in Pieces is just fantastic. Now they have a great game against the Teamer Fireballs deck, but... did I say Pest Infestation? Wrong
Pest
card.
Control,
Sorry.
Pest Control.
Pest Control.
Pest Control.
That's what
Yeah.
You said Control there, Carlo, and I'm like, no, it's not good against Blue-White Control. What is he talking about?
Yeah, no,
You're saying Pest Control. Right.
No, Pest Infestation is the commander card that was on the breaking news sheet. Yeah. Yes.
But it's been a great sideboard addition. Thankfully, just a one of. So even though it's a mythic from the big score sheet, it's not ridiculously priced. But do you guys know? Sorry, as a sidebar here, what the most expensive card out of that thing is right now? Out of the big score sheet, there's a one mythic that is. I think it was like 50 tickets on Magic Online, like in the last few days.
I think I know. Or at least I have a very. My guess would be Simulacrum.
Yes,
Yes,
it's Simpson. Yeah,
Oh.
This card apparently, standard. Nobody's I don't see it anywhere. Nobody's really messing with it, which
I've
is
tinkered
too
with
bad.
it a little, and it's fine, but it's not. It's
powerful.
It's just a powerful card. Like bottom line, it's just a powerful card. Yeah,
it's going up in price. I think the real life card is like $60 or something, 70. I don't even know.
That is a great example of the kind of card that we're not seeing in these competitive decks in the Pro Tour right now. That if they had, say, another week of preparation going into it, maybe there is a standard deck that can take advantage of this that we just don't we don't see.
There were some that were playing it in this Pro Tour.
There
was a blue-white artifacts deck that most certainly is playing it, and
excellent.
Also a Jeskai version.
Ooh, okay.
But not very many.
Yeah,
just a few deck lists that I think
Yeah.
are probably included in like the other category.
That 12% other, which
breakdown.
Yeah. But and at the end of the day, it's not that these players and not that these deck builders can't come up with those decks. I think the real challenge is testing them conclusively, like getting enough reps in that amount of time. And so, Damien, to your point earlier, they ultimately kind of played it safe and decided to go with. And I actually saw a tweet by Jim Davis basically saying just that, where it's like, I think he expressed that he was kind of disappointed that we didn't have more time to test. Because
and he likes testing. He's a brewer.
Absolutely.
He likes brewing.
Yeah.
But I think even he would admit, like any inventor would admit, that 90% of your ideas get scrapped. So like even if they had a lot more time, I still am not confident that they probably would have tried a lot of this stuff and basically said this is just not consistently good enough against the other well-tuned decks, and so maybe not, but I don't know. I would have been interesting to see, but it would have been probably a lot of just time wasted testing around this.
There would have been some of that, and and I fully expect instead of 31% Esper midrange, maybe it would have been 28% Esper midrange, or so. It would still be, at the end of the day, that deck's good. We all know the deck's good, no question, but there might have been a couple of players who got another build confident to a point where they felt confident registering it, and that would have been enough for me personally. But
in the past
regardless,
too, we would have had other tournaments before the Pro Tour. Even a couple years ago, whether we're talking about GPs that got scrapped, or when Star City Games was doing its circuit where it was doing 2 to 3 tournaments a month. You always had some event that these pros were able to test their decks without being in like a testing house. And granted, they still did that anyway. But, they would have had some competitive event to test this idea. And then results that would have come from those tournaments that they would have been able to take, okay, well, why did this deck work versus matchup X, Y, and Z? And how can we change this to more refine it? There's no opportunity to do that outside of playing your decks on the arena ladder and like on a Magic Online challenge, let's say, because there's no tournament in between. So you're now less results oriented when you're trying to determine the refinement of a deck. So it kind of makes them rely on what worked before Thunder Junction, right? So did we know that Esper was the best deck before Thunder Junction? Yes. Right? Or Demir, at least, right?
Sure.
We knew that Rafine is probably one of the best cards in Standard. So how can we refine this build to be the best? Without having the data that it's good with these new cards, or versus other decks also playing new cards.
You're right.
There's no way you can plan against, for example, 25 other decks. Right. It's just not. But that's the beauty of the diversification of Standard, right? That there are 25 other decks that aren't necessarily considered part of the metagame. But you have to just go with what you think are your top 3 decks that you're going to play against. And what new Thunder Junction cards are those decks also playing? Is there a deck that's like almost exclusively Thunder Junction based that you want to make sure that your deck is able to handle? And I think if we look at right now, and again, like you said, Ham, we're recording this as there's day 2 about to be played. So the only data we have as of this recording are what decks have done well in Standard only during day 1 of the Pro Tour. So that's 4 rounds?
Yeah.
They played 7 total. And the number 1 deck after that, in terms of results oriented, according to Frank Carson's breakdown, was Jund Analyst, followed by Ordzov Bronco. Now, granted, there aren't a whole lot of players playing those decks. They're sort of the off decks, which is great to see, right?
Great.
So we have, especially the Ordzov Bronco, because Bronco's from Thunder Junction. And, quite frankly, is a very, very strong Magic card. But that's followed by Golgari and then blue-white control. So you're talking about 2 decks that existed pre-Thunder Junction that are doing better than the majority of the field, which is playing Esper.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting. I again, like, it's hard to judge how good a deck is when only one person is playing it, or 2 people. It was just like, remember the Modern Pro Tour, Lord of the Rings Pro Tour, where Merfolk had the best constructed record at 7-2, and people were like, "See, I told you, it's Merfolk. Merfolk's the best." And it's like, whoa. That one dude did well. Maybe he won a lot of die rolls. Maybe he drew, like, he could have just been running hot. We didn't suddenly see Merfolk explode into popularity in Modern. And that's where it gets really weird. Now, that was slightly different, but I think there's a lot here. I think some of these decks, they are onto something. For example, Jund Analyst. Like, when we saw that pop up in the deck archetypes and metagame breakdown, and they said, Jund Analyst, a bunch of the Canadian pros apparently are on this deck. And I was like, okay, but is this really a new deck? I think this is the Teamer Analyst deck. It's just an Analyst deck. To me, they're all the same. It doesn't matter if you're Sultai or Jund or Teamer. It's Nissa plus Analyst plus Virtue of Strength or whatever, and big X spell. It doesn't matter if it's Outrageous Robbery or if it's World Soul's Rage or whatever. You're just doing a big thing. So for me, is this is it a new deck? It's definitely a different deck, which I think is very sweet. But to me, the only new one is like Ordzov Bronco is like a straight rogue deck. That is like, wow. Because Bronco, it is very powerful, but boy, it dies to cut down. Oh.
Yep.
And with Esper being 30% of the metagame, people are going to be packing, every black deck's going to have 3 or 4 cut downs. I don't know.
And it gives you
he's doing
nothing
well.
when it enters. Like, it
But he's
doesn't
doing
protect
well.
itself, gives you 0 when it enters. Like, it's,
So I don't know. He's kicking ass with it. I don't know if it's
yesterday, yesterday the play of the day was on stream. They had out Shieldred, and they cast Insatiable Avarice.
Oh yeah.
To target their opponent to draw the cards and lose the life
and win the game. I saw that. Win the match. He won the match with that. Yeah, it was great. Oh, you got to remember that. Yeah, you never Blue Sun Zenith your opponent to deck them. Oh yeah, I've been there.
Whereas what is supposed to happen in this deck, at least it seems, is you're supposed to Insatiable Avarice, Shadows of Mortality from Nuka Penna on top of your deck, saddle the horse, and attack with the horse, and opponent takes 15. Like, that's what you're supposed to do with this.
It's kind of sweet. So that's
card.
We should get to this after.
Standard.
So these are the rogue decks. One last deck before we jump into these wild, like, kind of different takes on these decks and stuff. Boros Convoke. That's the last top deck.
Okay.
I'm kind of shocked. It's the most linear deck. I thought, man, Temporary Lockdown, Path of Peril. Now we've got Pest Control. There's so many ways to sweep tokens. How is this deck the second most played deck among the pros? I'm not shocked that Esper's number 1, but I thought number 2, number 3 would be like Analyst, Domain, maybe Legends, sure. Boros Convoke, like, I mean, it's got the best game one in the format. It's got the best curve in the format, the 1, 2, 3. Like, it's got the best early game, right? So maybe pros are just going, hey, like, if I can steal game one, if I win enough die rolls in this tournament and I steal game one and then I get to be on the play again game 3, like, that's enough to play a deck that maybe does, like, everybody's going to have sideboard hate against me. I'm just going to lose to turn 3 Temp Lockdown or Path of Peril or whatever. But if I don't, like, if I win the die rolls and, you know, everything goes my way, then, you know, I draw enough nut draws in the tournament. My win rate is high enough that it's worth it. What do you think?
I think I think if players are maybe newer to the Pro Tour, playing a deck that is that straightforward might be beneficial, especially if they're going to have some nerves. I know, like, for me, if I were to, you know, go to the Pro Tour for the very first time, I know that I'm going to be a wreck, nervous wreck the entire time. I do not want to bring something that has a million triggers on it. And so I can appreciate the idea of just, this deck is the deck that people need to respect. And it's like, well, I'm going to be the one who's going to, you know, enforce that. Because if they have a Temp Lockdown, if they have a Brotherhood Zen, if they have a Pest Control, you lose the game. But if they don't, you win more often than not.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can kind of appreciate the idea of just show up, do the thing, and steal some wins. And yeah, exactly. If you're on the play consistently with this deck and they don't draw their sideboard pieces, I mean, it just wins. Like the amount of power that can get placed on the board so quickly with this deck. We've all, you know, we've seen what it can do at this point. We've all lost to it. Yeah, we've all lost to it on Arena. We know what's capable. I've definitely had games where I had a 4-mana sweeper in my hand and that was just too slow. You know, like I've had that happens all the time.
The game one free wins are enough to register the deck. I guess it's kind of interesting. So, I mean, they really picked up almost nothing from the new set. They got the land was incredible. That was by far the best pickup. But no, like, actual spells for the deck. No real new cards. We don't see anything being showcased here. Oh, Carlo.
There's one new card that some of the builds are playing. That is Nurturing Pixie from Thunder Junction.
Yeah, I did see that card. Yeah. What do you think of this?
Well, one of the reasons to my mind that this is important to play is to keep being able to cast your Immodane's Recruiters.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the idea.
Yeah, it lets you pick it up and cast it again for another turn. Or let's say you want to pick it up and then cast it for 5 to get you 2/2/2s in play. And it's another solid 1-drop that you can play and tap for your Warden of the Inner Sky.
It's got evasion.
Yeah. It's got flying. It seems great.
If anybody out there doesn't know Nurturing Pixie, it's a 1/1 fairy rogue for a single white with flying, which alone, I mean, Zephyr Sprite, effectively in white, sure. When it enters the battlefield, return up to one target non-fairy, non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If a permanent was returned this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So yeah, it can be a 2/2 for 1 with flying if you've got something else online first.
You can pick up Voldaren Epicure, right? Pick up Novice Inspector to get you another clue token. Yeah.
A lot of ETBs. Not to mention ETB creatures, like picking up a Resolute Reinforcements and making another body, like when you have a War Leader's Call in play, that's very powerful. This reminds me of Zephyr Sentinel in the Blue-White Soldiers decks. That's exactly the role that this is playing. However, this does not have flash, and it can't pick itself, or it can't pick other copies of itself up, so you can't loop them, which is slightly worse, but still very powerful. I think you're right. The main reason it's seeing play is to bounce those Immodane's Recruiters. That feels so win more to me. I don't know. Are they playing 4 of those things? Probably not, right?
Most
I don't even
of us are playing 2, it seems.
2, yeah, that makes more sense.
It's
interesting. Yeah, that was a
10 total 1-drops.
Yeah,
and
I can also appreciate this giving. I like the idea of picking up Voldaren Epicures or those other options. The other, if you're in a board stall scenario where your like Knight Errant of Eos isn't really doing enough work, being able to pick it back up and then reconvoke it to refill your hand. I can appreciate it when the games are getting grindy. Having some evasion might also be relevant. Because just. With your Immodane's Recruiter down, if you did bounce something when it came down, this would be a 3/2 flyer, on the turn with the Recruiter. It's another body that can get buffed by, War Leader's Call or the Battle Cry off of the Bat Generator, the Sanguine Evangelist, I think it is. All of that stuff. Like, I see why they like it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But mostly the deck's doing the same old thing. So yeah, it was interesting to see that many players register a deck that people are playing a lot of sweepers against and everything else. But I haven't looked at the win rates. I don't know how well Boros is doing. I see a Boros Prowess deck. I think that's a slightly different deck that's doing
Boros Convoke after day 1. has a
43.
43.2% win rate.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why I was kind of surprised to see it in second. So we've covered most of the top decks here. The last one, maybe Domain Ramp, is the last one we should maybe touch on. But Domain's been around forever. It made up 30% of the metagame, back when RCQ season was happening. But now, everybody kind of has a plan to beat it. There's decks like Teamer Fireball where Domain is like just a big dog against them. So I was trying a bunch of stuff out in Domain. I was trying Ancient Cornucopia on 3 because the card would gain you like 5-6 life on average over the course of a game. It takes the place of the either Invasion of Zendikar or, instead of going turn 3 Topiary into Invasion, you'd go Ancient Cornucopia, and then you could still play like Depop or Sunfall on turn 4. And it's gaining you so much life. It helps in those matches where you resolve Atraxa and you tap out for it. You put, all these cards in your hand, but then you can't untap because they go for the throat and then Alpha Strike kill you. Ancient Cornucopia gaining you 4 life off an Atraxa gets you that buff where they kill your Atraxa, they smash you, and they can't kill you. As long as you can survive that one turn, when you play Atraxa, you're going to untap with Sunfall and Leyline and Angel and all these cards and all this mana. You just need to untap that turn, and the few extra life from this card really did it. Now, nobody's playing it. That was me. I was like, that was one idea. I was testing. I had like a main deck final showdown. The white instant speed Wrath, which was really good in the mirrors because now all these Domain decks are playing one Imidane's Recruiter, and the whole plan is kind of no Nissas, none of that. We're just going to go Herd Migration, Imidane's, bam, kill you. And this lets you go, instant speed Wrath you. Oops, like in the mirror, when it goes super long, you end up finding this. And I thought this might see play, but the pros said no. The lists I've seen, we mentioned it just before we started the podcast, they're playing one copy or maybe 2 of the 2-mana Rampant Growth that I'm sure you know the name of. I don't.
Glimpse the Core.
Glimpse the Core. And then the other one I thought was very interesting was this 4-mana sorcery. I have to go find the name, but it's a 4-mana sorcery that basically lets you look at the top 7 cards, I think, and put 2 lands into play. Any lands. And I was like, that's really weird, though. Isn't that just doing the same thing as Invasion of Zendikar? But, you can get tri-lands off it, but, Invasion flips into a creature. Isn't that just way better with Topiary Stomper and stuff? But actually, I think if you're expecting a lot of Esper midrange and maybe Dimir Tempo or other decks that are going to be playing counter spells, being able to play a 4-mana ramp card that gets a Cavern of Souls into play so that you can untap and go uncounterable Angel, guaranteed, is pretty sweet. I think that might be the main reason they're playing that weird sorcery. I'm trying to look for a list here so I can find
It's not Cartographer's Survey, is it?
Oh, that might be it. Yeah. Cartographer's Survey. Yeah. 4-mana sorcery. Yeah, look at the top 7, 2 lands. So any lands. Yeah, go ahead. My conclusion was Cavern of Souls.
I think Cartographer's Survey is a card that is better than it first reads, but that's coming from a casual Commander player. I don't think... And I enjoy this kind of effect, and they've done a couple of these, because there's another one from Phyrexian one that's name is escaping me right now, where if you don't find a land, you get to proliferate. And that's pretty cool. But I don't know. It's 2 lands for 4, and the fact that you're not limited to basics is huge. So I like that a lot.
Right.
But I am shocked to see any competitive list running these.
We have a bunch of these, right? We have all these 4-mana put 2 lands into play. There's a bunch actually in standard right now.
Design thing they're doing. Sure.
Why is this the best one? That's what I was trying to figure out. How is this better than Invasion? Yeah, Invasion gets you basics, this doesn't, but this only looks at the top 7. You're probably not whiffing very often, but at the same time, I think it's there to get a Cavern into play so that you can untap with 6 mana, play your 7th mana, slam Atraxa or slam an Angel or slam whatever, and know that it's going to be uncounterable. So I thought it was really interesting. Anyway, those were the only big changes I saw in most of the Domain lists I was looking at. The rest look like the typical, some are playing Spelunking, a couple of them have 1 copy of a temporary lockdown or something in the main. Most of them are on 2 Depop, 4 Sunfall. I think 6 Wraths is the right number. I was on 2 Depop, 3 Sunfall, 1 Final Showdown or whatever. But so what do you think of these decks? This deck is probably the most known quantity in the Pro Tour because Esper can always be different. They can play a bunch of different versions. What do you think? Sorry, Carlo, I don't know if you were going to talk about this before.
Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of the lists that I saw were making this move to play, some amount of pest control in the main. It seems as though they chose to play that card instead of temporary lockdown, which I'm not sure that I am sold on, because I definitely was enjoying playing temporary lockdown in the deck. Pest control does have you the ability to cycle, and I guess they were taking priority of playing against the Boros Convoke deck and being able to hit those early 1-drops or less for 2 mana as opposed to wait till 3. But really, in Domain, you're not casting this card until like turn 3.
It's
because
white
you're
black.
probably playing two tap lands. Yeah.
And
so
they're
that
green.
means you need a Jetmir's Garden plus Zeator's Proving Ground untapped to be able to do this.
Yeah.
A lot of the lists I saw were playing some amount of Splunking, whether it was 2, 3, or 4. In there just for that extra ramp. It essentially is Topiary Stomper number 4, 5, 6, right?
Yeah,
Right.
If you were playing it in that slot. All of them I saw that were playing Imodane's Recruiter, like the one of in the main, to be able to give your Atraxa and things like that haste.
Yeah. That's the new late game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Makes sense.
as well as playing Long Goodbye in the main to be able to deal with the Rafine.
And like
for
3 in the board. Like I said, 4 Long Goodbye in the 75 in almost all the Domain lists. I was like, whoa, that's a departure from the usual.
I love that. I'm super high on Long
Yeah.
Goodbye. It hits most of the things. And even in like the Boros match, you're not going to be happy. But if you can hit a Warden of the Inner Sky with this, okay. Like that,
And
it's not as good as
Long
Rafine,
Goodbye-
but you're still not mad at that.
Long Goodbye also kills Duelist in the Mind. It deals with Fairy Mastermind. It deals with Aftermath Analyst, because that's a 2 mana card. It kills Nissa for 3.
The best part
Long
is
Goodbye is such a sweet removal spell.
And they can't counter it. They can't touch it.
Can't
It's
be
so
countered is the reason. It's so good against Esper mid-range. Like, ignore the ward on Rafine, ignore their No More Lies, ignore their Urtai or whatever. Like, not being able to be countered is really... Because Go for the Throat does all the things that we just said. It kills all those creatures too, but this being uncounterable is incredible. Kills creature lands, it doesn't matter about artifacts or not. Since we're talking about Doomblades here, I did see a few Shoot the Sheriff floating around. I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, they're just gonna switch Go for the Throat for this," and I'm like, I don't know. I think Go for the Throat is still better, but I don't know how many Outlaws are running around in Standard. Right. You don't notice how many until you have this card in your hand, Shoot the Sheriff, and you're like, "Oh wait, that's a pirate!" Like, "Oh my god, I can't." Or that random, Yeah,
I don't know. Is anybody else having flashbacks to Power Word Kill? Being like, "Oh, I kill. Oh, it's an angel. Dang it!"
And that card did not see a ton of play for that reason. It was okay, but it was still
Yeah, it's not bad. But when your opponent has a dragon or a demon, it's like, this feels awful. Like, why? Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if Shoot the Sheriff's good or worse, but Long Goodbye seems great against Esper specifically, and you can tell these Domain players knew that there was going to be a lot of Esper, so they're like, I see 4 in the 75, usually 3 in the sideboard, 1 in the main, or vice versa. But anyway, so those are the top decks. So now let's get to the fun stuff, I think, unless you guys want to add anything else.
I think this has all been fun, so I'm really excited to see what's coming next. All right.
So let's jump in. We talked about Orzhov Bronco. Let's talk about this deck. So Carlo, you mentioned the combo in this deck. Like, what is this deck actually trying to do here?
Yeah. So what you basically have to do in this deck is you have to be able to play that Bronco on 2, right? So Bronco is Dark Confidant, but on attack trigger. So you would reveal top card of your library and lose life equal to the mana value, or if it's saddled, saddle cost is 3. So 3 or more power has to be saddled into it. You reveal the top card and your opponent loses life equal to the mana cost instead of you. Right. So, things that have 3 power that you can play on turn 3 include Tenacious Underdog, which we know from Mono Black's past, right? Strong 3/2 for 2 mana. That can reanimate itself from the yard. You have Rafine's Informant, which lets help you smooth your draws, and it becomes a 3/2. You get to play Anointed Peacekeeper on 3, and that card has Vigilance. So you get to tax your opponent's hand and make them take life equal to the mana cost. And you get to play Steel Seraph, which is important because on 3 mana, it is a 3 power creature. But when you flip it off the top of the deck, it most certainly costs 6 mana cost. to be able to deal life to your opponent.
It's cheeky. I love it.
Talking about 3 drops with 3 power that have high casting costs, it begs the question here. There's a glaring omission to me in this deck that seems perfect for this deck. Phyrexian Fleshgorger. Why is that card not in this deck? It seems perfect. I don't know. It's weird, but
it's a fair question.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm curious if the deck builders felt as though Steel Seraph was better for its ability than Fleshgorger was to deal the extra point of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. Yeah. Getting lifelink against aggro, getting vigilance against Wandering Emperor decks, and that's why Anointed Peacekeeper's a pain in the butt. If you ever play, Esper midrange is rocking a couple Emperors, but even blue-white control or whatever. God, creatures with vigilance. Ugh, they're just happen to be very good right now because Wandering Emperor is still an excellent card in Standard and sees play in some of the best decks. So the Peacekeeper, the Seraph, maybe that's why. I'm still shocked that God, it feels like such a instead of a tenacious underdog, but anyway, definitely cool.
Fleshgorger is just I've had a number of decks where I thought about it, and I'm always happy to have Fleshgorger because that even as a 3/3, it can just carry a game with the menace and the lifelink if need be, and the ward. It's doing all the things you want. So I agree. I suspect there's maybe a place for it, but I'm sure the folks who put that list together were very deliberate, and I'm sure they considered it. But you're right. It looks like it would fit. Yeah,
they're also playing in this deck Shrouded Shepherd on 2 mana, which is also a way to deal with Convoke in the main by giving all the creatures -1/-1. Yeah, for 2 mana, that's the adventure side.
Wow.
Or when it enters the battlefield, it gives another creature +2/+2. So it can pump something to be able to saddle. Or, hey, let's say you got a Steel Seraph that's a 3/3 in play, and you're on turn 4, and you're like, okay, I'm going to play this 2 mana creature, make my Steel Seraph a 5/5. It's of a body. So it's pretty good. It's pretty versatile. And you're talking about a deck that is able to also play that Shadows of Mortality card that we showed you.
Yeah. So are they ever casting
15 mana card?
I guess, are they casting this? Because, you are Caustic Broncoing, so you are losing life, but you have, Sholdred to gain life, you have Steel Seraph to gain life, you're not, this isn't, what is it called? Death Shadow, where you're thought seizing and shocking yourself, and so, is this ever getting cast, or is it just pure meme value here?
So I was trying to play a couple matches last night on Arena with this deck, and surprisingly, I cast this more than I thought I would.
Oh,
if it was something that's stuck in your hand, and you're playing against a mid-range deck, and they getting you down to 10, then it's this card is costing you 5 mana for a 7/7. So, and if you've got Steel Seraph, you just give that thing lifelink and gain some life back.
Yeah, right.
you know.
That's one of the nice things about this over Death Shadow is if you gain life after it's live, you still have the 7/7. You don't lose any. So okay,
it's an interesting one. Insatiable Avarice obviously works well here, and this is what actually makes Shadow of Mortality, I think, makes sense. If it was just Shadow and you're hoping to hit it off a horse, that's not good enough. But when you get to go Insatiable Avarice, and then you don't even cast the draw part, just 3 mana, put the thing on top with a Bronco in play. So that's turn 2 Bronco, turn 3, the Bronco flips whatever, you play your land, you Avarice, put the 15 drop on top, pass, turn 4, reveal, deal 15 to you, and I've already hit you once, so now you're at 2 life, and I hit you again, put you to 1 on turn 4, right? Is that the nut draw, basically? Assuming your opponent's a goldfish and they don't kill your Caustic Bronco and whatever else, but
assuming they're not running Play with Fire or something.
One turn longer, I think turn 5 that happens.
Oh,
because you have to have the 3-power creature and play the turn 3.
Oh, the saddle. Oh,
you
right.
You got to saddle first. So so Bronco on 2, creature on 3, Avarice on 4, loaded up swing. If you and you can hit the Shadow on 4. That is possible. Yeah, and on turn 3, you are swinging with the Bronco, but you're getting a blind flip off the top. So who knows? Maybe you hit it on turn 3 if you're lucky.
But I like it as a 2 of, or even a 1 of, just to fetch up with the Avarice. That's it. So this deck, it's so weird to see just a mid-range pile. It's purely 24 land, just mid-range value deck, but it's got so much reach because of Sholdred, because of that Caustic Bronco, because of Insatiable Avarice, like you mentioned, Carlo. The guy on camera burned his opponent out just by forcing the opponent to draw 3, and hey, lightning bolt to your face, that does it.
Well, and drawing 3 cards for 3 mana, that's you're not going to get a better rate than that. I mean, worst case scenario, it's you're just going to refill your hand with it. That's nothing wrong with that.
It's an interesting deck. Again, my big I haven't played with it, so I can't speak to this yet, but Caustic Bronco dying to cut down, and that being one of the most important cards in the deck. You don't have a lot of recursion, right? We're not bringing
just
stuff back from the graveyard. Just Takenuma, one Takenuma, yeah. It's interesting. So it'll be interesting to see if this deck puts up numbers after the Pro Tour. The one dude, or I guess there's two people playing it in the Pro Tour, but one of them is doing quite well with it. So
somebody was 6-1 at the end of day one. With
I think that's the
I definitely need to
one guy.
tinker with this. So I adore this because I do run Shadow of Mortality in one of my commander decks, and it's of course Yuriko the Tiger Shadow because that's what that deck does. I don't play it often because I try not to alienate people with that deck, which it does. And it's the same deal where it's like my goal is not to ever cast it. It's just to flip it off the top and dome the table for 15. The idea that is how this works in Standard is kind of blowing my mind, and I'm loving that. It's wild. Also, if anybody was curious, if you're looking up like the card Draco, if you're ever wondering, like, why is that like a $3 or $4 card? It's because of Yuriko. That's the only reason. But it's the same deal. And that's the other demand for Shadow Mortality. So this deck sounds amazing. I'm wondering, would it make sense? So Takenuma being the only recursion, but there's so much card draw, and there are tutors. So finding additional copies of the Bronco wouldn't be terrible. Like, wouldn't be impossible if you're stumbling. Yeah. But I can't help but wonder if there are opportunities for other cards. I'm just gonna throw this out there. Lively Dirge, is that one that might be worthwhile in a situation like this? So
put it in your graveyard.
It's a spree card that for 3 is like, you get a 1 card buried alive, or search a library for a card, put it in your yard. That's whatever. But or for 4, return up 2 creatures with total mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's the mode that I'm thinking would be relevant.
Could be.
I mean, as a 1 of or 2 of in this kind of a deck, just to make sure the Broncos keep doing what they're doing. Or maybe that's too situational.
I don't think there are enough 2-drops. There are very few 2-drops. There's just Caustic Bronco as a 4 of. Everything else, there's 2 Shepherd, and Shepherd doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, that's not
when you bring it back. Yeah. There's 2 Underdog, and there's 2 Informant. That's it. So there's not a ton to bring back. There's so many 3-drops because you want that saddle 3, and all the 3-drops have 3 power. That I feel like maybe there. I don't know. Could have been something there, but that's interesting. Yeah, because I feel like, I don't know, what do you do when they kill your Broncos? Like, you're just kind of like, hope you find another one or 2.
Hope you find a Sheoldred or something like that, and just keep punching ahead in good mono black.
Looks like a sweet deck.
Interesting. Yeah. Very
cool.
So
another version of a, well, I guess we can go to new decks here, or we can talk about, like, Jund Analyst to me is not like a new deck. It's just a different spin on the Analyst Nissa shell. Have you guys seen this deck in action? The Jund, Analyst deck?
I've seen versions of it on Arena only. And by versions, I mean decks that were not necessarily playing Virtue of Strength, but relying more on Splendid Reclamation again, which was like the early version of these Analyst decks cared more about Splendid Reclamation, right? What the card that really sticks out to me, because we know Splendid Reclamation, I mean, we've had that in Magic a couple times, but I think probably one of the best cards in the deck is the new from Thunder Junction. That is Pillage the Bog. That's
Pillage
Mr. Bever's previews card, by the way. And it's black and green for a sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is twice the number of lands you control. Put 1 in your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library. Or you can plot this for 3. And this card reminds me a lot of that alchemy card that exists on Arena. That basically is like search the top third of your deck or something, assemble the team. So to me, these 2 cards are pretty much the same. Because, in the lands deck, when you've got 10 lands out, I mean, hey, I'm looking at the top 10.
Or, at that point in the game, you might be able to do your whole deck. I mean,
yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, this has got to be like the best tutor card I can play. Like, this is finding you your payoff. Or on turn 2, what do you get to look at the top 4 cards? Pick 1 card, still worth, right? For two mana. And in this particular version, I mean, World Soul's Rage is your win condition, but it lets you find the pieces to World Soul's Rage your opponent. So whether that is finding the Splendid Reclamation that we just talked about, or you can actually, with Pitless Carnage, which is also from Thunder Junction. This is a sorcery that's 3 and a black. Sacrifice any number of permanents you control, then draw that many cards. You can sack your lands, float the mana, get your lands back with Aftermath Analyst or with World Soul's Rage. Right? So you're just blowing up your board and reanimating it all in one turn.
This card is great.
And you can plot it for 3. So you can basically float all your mana the next turn, cast this card for free, and just go off.
Yeah, it's very cool. I was going to say, like, one of the most important cards in the Team World Soul's Rage deck, if you play that deck a lot, is Memory Deluge. You must draw Memory Deluge multiple times, because you really, like, you can ramp and you can do the thing, but your deck's not doing anything with all that mana unless you can start finding those pieces. So when I thought, there's no way you can make an Analyst deck without playing blue, because how are you digging? You need a way to really dig. But this set, apparently these 2 black cards, or black-green card and a black card, give you that card draw, or like Pillage the Bog specifically is kind of like doing the Memory Deluge replacement here. You don't get to flash it back, but yeah, being able to just dig that deep is such an important part of this kind of Nissa Analyst shell. So it does seem sweet. However, yeah, like you've got the World Soul's Rage to kind of finish them off here. You've got Gix's Command kind of filling it out. You're not playing any black removal. Like it's all these Jund Esper Analysts. Yeah, they're all in on the combo. 28 land, so similar there. A little bit less land. 16 basics instead of 17. So no adventure card, Virtue of Strength. There's no Virtue of Strength in this deck. That's a big one that's missing. That card is obviously, like, if you've ever made 60,000 mana just tapping a forest after doppelganging a Virtue of Strength or whatever. This card crashes Arena very easily with Doppelgang. And so it's so powerful. I'm kind of surprised to see it here, even though they're playing green, but they basically went, no.
They're doing the Splunking package instead, so taking advantage of the constantly reanimating your lands, them entering play untapped, being able to float mana and stuff. Yeah.
And that makes more sense when you're going for Analyst and for Splendid Reclamation. Like, that's a lot of graveyard recursion. So the Spelunking, of course, being so much better when you are doing that much. Like, the Teamer Fireball decks often only play the Analysts. They don't play a bunch of... maybe one. I've seen people playing, like, one Reclamation or something, but that's it. So I feel like the Jund Analyst decks are more vulnerable to graveyard hate because of that. Isn't that like an issue for them? I'm kind of wondering. Like I see a Titan of Industry in the sideboard, so they're kind of trying to do the same thing as the Teamer Fireball deck where you're audibling into a creature package, but it's just one Titan. Like, is that enough? That's crazy to me. I don't know, but it's interesting. Path of Peril is great. Your Wrath, your Sweeper here is going to be better out of the sideboard than the Teamer deck's Explosions. You know, it's just cheaper. But Titan out of the sideboard, no Bonnie Paul, of course, because we're not playing blue. So that's it. Like, it's kind of, I'm like, wow, I would feel like I would be more susceptible to graveyard hate with the Jund Analyst deck as opposed to the Teamer. But I don't know. I haven't seen it on camera. I'm curious how they do that, because the Teamer decks are very clearly doing this transformational sideboard thing, and I don't see that here. At least the lists I'm looking at, I think they're all the same list. It's the same team playing this Jund Analyst deck, but so really sweet deck. I again, these are the things that will come out in the wash as we see these players play these games, and the world at large goes, oh, let me play with this, and people start figuring out, oh yeah, like, you know, I don't know, we need to do this out of the sideboard to beat Rest in Peace or whatever, but definitely sweet. And 2 rare cards from the new set just kind of anchoring this deck is very sweet. I love to see it. Pitiless Carnage reminds me of, like, I don't know what, like Necropotence, or I don't know. It just, that is such insane card draw. That raw card draw is so ridiculous. I love stuff like that. Just draw 8 cards, you know, like massive amount of cards.
And we also appreciate that the art is by the one and only Richard Kane Ferguson. I mean, if you ever look at this and go, man, this looks like a classic card, it's like, well, yeah,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Damn. I didn't even know he was still doing art for.
I didn't realize that either, but looking at it,
Magic.
yeah, because I had the moment looking at that where I was just kind of, I think I had this in my pre-release pool or something, and I remember looking at the artwork, feeling like, man, this feels like it came out a while ago, and then I saw the art, it's like, oh, I saw the byline, it's like, oh, that makes sense, yeah, good stuff.
Now, it's a sweet deck. It's got the highest win rate according to Frank Karsten right now, but again, there's not many players playing it, so that's where it gets really wonky with that kind of stuff. But we'll see how it shakes out.
Right?
Two are playing
two
it.
players maybe totally playing this deck. That's why it had like a 7-1 match win rate. So yes, the data, and I love Frank Karsten for doing the data work that they do more.
He's a saint. Yeah.
But
100%.
it's important. It's always important when taking a look at the data sets, you take a look at how many people are playing the deck. Because obviously the less people but higher win rate is going to reflect a higher percentage, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Where you really want to look, in my opinion, is at the decks that have a higher amount of players playing them and their win rates. So, even Golgari mid-range isn't a whole lot. They had a total of 12 match wins, 4 match losses. That means there's, 4 players playing Golgari mid-range or something like this? Azorius Control, on the other hand, has a 26-15 rate, so 63%. In terms of percentage. So to me, that's the highest out of the most played decks.
Yeah, because it's
with the highest win rate is Azorius.
10 players. It's almost 5% of the field. Yeah, a much larger number of players doing well with that deck. So much more games played with blue-white as opposed to, you're exactly right. Yeah.
And then followed by Temur Analysts, and then 4-color Legends. And then Mono Red, even though I don't think we saw a lot of Mono Red being played on stream yesterday. Those decks too have a 54% roughly mid win rate.
That reminds me, there's two decks I really want to touch on that I think are interesting. They're not new decks. We can try and dig up another new list if we want to talk about that. But Mono Red getting Slick Shot and Golgari, a deck that I always thought was just like not quite tier 1, but so close. Picking up that Bronco and picking up some other stuff. Let's talk about that. But first, Red. So Slick Shot Show Off. Obviously, we knew this card was going to be busted in Pioneer, busted in Modern. I mean, blue-red prowess decks are so close to being tier 1 in those formats, and now this might just do it. But in Standard, I was like, we have Spire Bluff Canal, that's really good. Like maybe a blue-red prowess or blue-red kind of like spells deck. But no, just mono red, just picking this up. And Gruul, I've seen some Gruul lists doing good work with this. Is this enough to make mono red run with the big dogs and run with Domain and Esper mid-range and all that? What do you guys think of this mono red Slick Shot?
I think it depends on the build of mono red. I'm in love with Fugitive Codebreaker from Karlov Manor. I think that card is fantastically designed. It's just a solid 2/1 prowess haste if you wanted to play it on 2. But you can disguise it and refill your hand, so it gives the deck more of a late game play versus I have to kill you immediately. Playing more cards like Ren's Resolve or Reckless Impulse type effects. To be able to trigger all of your creatures who have prowess and care about getting buffed up. It's pseudo card draw, right? Because you get to play cards off the top of your deck instead, or at least let you smooth out your land drops, because the decks typically only play between 19 and 22 lands, depending upon the build. And it lets you be able to do that more flawlessly when you are smoothing out your draws for that one too. And it still buffs up Slick Shot by +2/+0. If you late game have a Slick Shot on the board, and by late game for mono red, I mean turn 4, and you're able to Reckless Impulse or Ren's Resolve on turn 3 and get a Play with Fire. Opponent's taken 5, 6, 7 damage, plus you have cards left to play that's left over from the Ren's Resolve type of effect the next turn.
Yeah, this card almost feels like this plus Slick Shot almost lets you set up these big combo turns where you kind of build up. You've got a couple cards in exile, you've got the Slick Shot plotted, and now I untap with 4 mana, 2 cards in exile and the Slick Shot for free, and I just get to go Slick Shot 4 spells, kill you, right? Just do a ton of damage.
100%.
I saw a lot of Gruul. I thought it was better in Gruul because Gruul had that way to protect it. They play those Tivar stands or those Tameo safekeepings or whatever the flavor of the month is, royal treatment. One of those effects, And that lets you really go, okay, I'm setting up this big turn. My opponent can see what I'm doing. Plot is face up. You know, these exiled cards are face up. They know it's coming. They're saving their removal for that turn. And how am I getting through with that slick shot when they know I'm gearing up for this big combo turn? Well, the Gruul decks were able to kind of protect the threat, but I don't see a lot of Gruul at the Pro Tour here. I see Mono Red actually more played than Gruul. So I'm kind of wondering, maybe just Mono Red, forget it. We don't need to protect our creatures. Let's just play more creatures. And if they kill a couple, well, that'll be fine. We'll just play more.
I mean, I personally enjoy the Gruul decks a lot more because, like you said, you get to play cards that protect your slick shot. Mono Red is not resilient against removal. Cut down does just kill an early slick shot unless they have like double cards to pump in response to your removal spell, and that's never the case early, right? It's always you cast the one card to pump it, and then somebody goes for the cut down. But even if you play the second card, it doesn't matter. Your card still gets cut down.
I know.
Cards like Go for Throat obviously are very good against Slick Shot no matter what. But I would think that the Gruul deck would be better because you get to play sweet cards like Questing Druid, and which does have a Rends Resolve ability attached to it, right? With the adventure.
Yeah, Druid is awesome.
And you get to play like you said, Royal Treatment or Snakeskin Veil even is in Thunder Junction again.
Yeah.
And that card is great. So I would think that would have been played maybe a little bit more. But maybe the Mono Red deck needs to be able to beat Esper fast, which I don't know how that's possible into Bat into Rafine, and nor do I think that the red deck could counteract those plays anyway.
It's tough.
So I assume your matchup is much worse.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, it's eight players, almost 4% of the field registered Mono Red aggro. There's a couple other flavors of aggro here, but yeah, I feel like Mono Red is good. Rakdos aggro, also exactly the same number of players and exactly the same percentage of the metagame here. That's another weird kind of aggro. To me, it's less aggro than the other Gruul and Mono Red, but I saw a lot of this on the ladder over the last week. A lot of people playing Rakdos aggro. Inti's back, and there's, they're playing a bunch of this kind of stuff, and I'm like, is this even good? I don't. It just feels like it loses to all the sideboard cards that people are bringing in against Boros. Like they're wrecking all your 2-drops. Everybody's playing Long Goodbye and Domain and these other. All those cards just ruin your day. Inti's busted. Love Inti.
Sure.
Nope. Great card. But he dies to cut down like everything else. And everybody's packing a lot of cut downs. Like all these little dudes just get wrecked by the removal in the format right now. So I don't know. It's weird to see so many players, like 16 players total, registering Rakdos aggro and Mono Red aggro.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention
slick shot, maybe.
Yeah, maybe people are leaning like pest control is becoming one of the answers to the Boros Convoke decks, which means 2-drops are a little more safe than they were previously, where you have your temporary lockdowns or Brotherhood's End, those kinds of other 3-mana sweepers that we've been relying on so far. So maybe there's a little bit of a window, or maybe that's what people are banking on for these 2-drops to all of a sudden be able to carry. But yeah, I completely agree. They still died at pretty much everything, and being low to the ground and going wide with anything other than Boros Convoke, anything that is going to be a little slower than Boros Convoke seems like a bad idea right now. I'm inclined to agree. It seems oddly positioned. But who knows? Maybe there's a 75 with this that ask the question. Okay, do you have one temporary lockdown? Okay, that's great. Yeah. Do you have 2? Maybe because Boros Convoke, if one temporary lockdown hits, that's game often. But maybe the Rakdos deck has a little more resilience and can fight through it a little better.
Well,
I don't know.
And they've got the bat, so they at least have a way to disrupt. They can at least go, here, let me take that lockdown. No, you're not doing this. Or let me take that Sunfall or whatever. But it's just a slower version of an aggro deck. It's more mid-rangey, and it's it's all the cards aren't really synergistic. They're all just individually powerful. You've got Preacher the Schism on 3, Shoulder on 4. Like they're just the best thing you can play. It's Rakdos. That's what it's every format. Same thing. Fable of the Mirror Breaker and whatever I want to throw in here. It doesn't matter. They're all great.
I think the inherent problem with like decks like this, and I'm a very, very much a Rakdos fan. Preacher and Shieldred are great cards.
Yeah.
I don't think that deck is beating Domain. And like Domain just will go so much more over the top. Your singular removal spells, your individual value creatures aren't enough to beat that deck.
I mean, where does
know,
your power spike here? Your spike is shoulder it. Is that the best thing you're doing? Maybe cruelty of Gick? No, they're not doing that.
and
Yeah,
I'm
your
not
power.
even convinced that Rakdos deck is good against Boros Convoke. There's no way.
Yeah.
If Boros pulls out sort of that crazy draw,
Go wide.
where they're
Sure.
able to play, you know, 1-drop creature that gives you an artifact, Gleeful Demolition, another creature, you're dead because your individual removal spells aren't doing anything. You might get Path of Peril out of the board, which is bad against your 2-drops and lower in your
Right.
your
It's
own deck.
weird.
Like
Yeah.
I don't think that would want to be my flavor of the tournament. I think, you know, going wider, you know, being able to play like a wider Rakdos deck that we saw in the last standard rotation, where you could play like Brotherhood End and Burn Down the House is fine, but that's still not very good against Esper. So
You mean, like the Rakdos ramp deck that was like reanimating and all that stuff?
Mhm.
Yeah, I was playing
Sure.
that deck for quite a while, and it was a control deck. I mean, yeah, you needed those sweepers to manage that board, and I like that. It's true. But but that's the difference. Like when you're playing like not Atraxa, Itali and Breach the Multiverse, those are powerful cards, but they are still dice roll cards. You know, and so not having that consistent, you know, top end, like, am I going to hit something huge here, or am I going to whiff and the whole deck, all the turns up till now led to this, and it's not worth it? That's disaster. Atraxa's always hitting. You know, all these other top ends are hitting. They are doing the thing every time. So it's weird. Like yesterday, this is one of the issues with the Analyst Nissa decks. And while we were watching the stream yesterday, or watching the Pro Tour on stream, I was talking to the chat, and we were talking about the you know, when you're doing a reanimator or a self-milling thing, you always have this aspect of variance that other decks don't have. Everybody suffers from the same variance when it comes to Mana Screw, Mana Flood, or Mulligans, or those kind of things. That's not deck dependent. But when you're playing a deck that wants to go turn 2 Analyst, mill 3 cards, and you mill 3 spells, it feels terrible. And I'm like, oh my god. And then I untap with Analyst, and I'm like, I can't activate this. There's 1 land in my yard. I gotta wait now. And then they draw their cut down, and it's like, oh my god. Like sometimes you can just randomly mill, you know, garbage, and the deck can lose to itself.
At least in the Temur deck, if you mill Memory Deluge, it's not a big deal.
Right.
I want Memory
It's not the end of
Deluge
the
in my
world.
yard. But like
Sure.
in the Jund deck,
yeah, you mill your
I don't
card
want
draw,
any
and you're
of
like,
those cards in my
oh
yard.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those aspects of those decks are really interesting, and it's something that I don't think people realize till they start playing with the deck, and you know, you whiff on a Tally, or you whiff on whatever, and you're like, or you play Teamer Fireballs and you mill with Analyst, or you double trigger Nissa and you find another Nissa, and you're like, god damn, what? I have 3 Analysts in the deck and only 1 more Nissa, and I ripped the Nissa off the Nissa trigger. That's it. I can't go off now. I just can't. That is devastating. So those kind of weird things, like Esper doesn't have that. In fact, Esper is the opposite, where you're looking at so many cards, you're filtering your draw, you're making sure you're finding all those things. You're not missing with that deck. You know what I mean? So it's funny, like some of these decks, the power spike is higher in Teamer Analyst and Jund Analyst in these decks. Like you're doing something way bigger than your opponents. But it's got this element of variance still that still can whiff, even if you're playing all the Splendid Reclamations and all this stuff. You know, none of those cards do anything unless you can consistently get those lands in the yard. So you see them playing 28 land, you see them playing 30 land, whatever in Teamer Analyst. But even then, I've missed, and it sucks. So it's funny. Yeah, a lot of these decks, I don't know, maybe you're just better off going with a more consistent kind of, Rakdos aggro. You know, they can't miss off a Breach or an Itali, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it's funny you mentioned that, because if I could take a brief aside when it comes to self-mill, recent designs have started doing like self-mill, but if you hit a certain thing, you just get to pick it back up. And I love that. That's why one of my favorite cards that they printed in recent memory, I don't think it's in any of these decks, because I don't think we have anything that's taking advantage of it, but Picklock Prankster is an awesome little card. I love this thing. So Free the Fae is an instant for 2. You mill 4 cards, then you put an instant sorcery or fairy from among the mill cards into your hand. So if you're doing a self-mill style deck, you know, there may or may not be fairies that are relevant, but at the end of the day, if you hit your big reanimation threats or whatever, great, they stay there. But if you hit, you know, an instant or sorcery, like one of the reanimation spells, like your Breach the Multiverse or something, pick it up. You get that in your hand.
I love Picklock.
So good.
And
It's so
the
good.
fact that you can find a pick lock off a pick lock is busted.
It's
I
pretty
love
nice.
doing that. Like when you can
Pretty
loop
nice.
that's why this card is such a good design.
good.
The fact that you can loop or you can chain them and stuff.
Yep.
But so let's go back to
yeah.
the lists here. There's a lot of weirdness. We see like I'm just gonna skim these quickly, but there's band controlled, Azorius artifacts we mentioned earlier. Could be cool. I've not seen the list for this deck. I know Azorius artifacts existed when Lost Caverns of Ixalan came out. People were trying to make this work, and it had Thousand Moon Smithy, and it had a bunch of this kind of stuff going on, and it was kind of quickly dismissed, and it wasn't very great. It was the bridge was your wrath, the 5-mana bridge that blows up creatures.
The glyph bridge,
the glyph bridge, and that's all done with. This is not doing that. Now this is doing what Simpson things, right? Simulacrum synthesizer.
Simulacrum synthesizer. Yep.
Simpson and Assimilation Aegis is another one. Yeah, Assimilation Aegis is 1 blue, 1 white, 1. Oh, sorry, Ham.
Yeah, no. So Assimilation Aegis. Honestly, I hadn't even seen this deck, but I just figure it's in there. If you're doing Azorius artifacts, it's so good. So this isn't. It's effectively like a Banishing Light or Oblivion Ring style effect, but it's on a 3-drop artifact that happens to be an equipment, which is pretty gnarly. So you can run it even if you don't get the set. So it does a lot, but the most important thing, when it enters the battlefield, you exile up to 1 target creature until it leaves the battlefield. And so just one of your opponent's things is just gone. It has the added bonus of equipping for 2, and then whatever it's equipped to becomes a copy of the creature you exiled. So that can get silly.
Imagine playing against Domain, and you have Assimilation Aegis for their Atraxa, and you exile their Atraxa with this, and then you equip it to your Thran Spider, and now all of a sudden your Thran Spider becomes Atraxa, and you get to attack with it.
Because it's already been around.
Thran Spider couldn't get any better. You're telling me it gets better?
It can get better. It is possible.
I love Thran Spider.
And in fact, you can use your Power Stone created by Thran Spider to pay for the cost of the Aegis or pay for the equip cost.
Pay for the equip cost. So you can be doing that on if they ramp really hard, and let's say you're on the play or on the draw or something. Maybe it's your turn 4, and you can hit them with that. That's nice. And
great.
Yeah, we approve of Thran Spider in this house. This card is so good.
I was playing a blue-red artifact ramp deck this week a little bit. Somebody top 8'd a challenge with it a week ago or something, and I was like, oh, there's a blue-red, and it's playing the Simulacrum synthesizer and all that stuff. But what was nice, as I was playing the deck, I realized there really is a dearth of artifact removal in Standard right now. Nobody's playing a Braid. I mean, World Soul playing it out of the board to deal with a Hearse, that's it. Nobody's playing, like, destroy all your artifacts. And then the removal that people are bringing in, stuff like Get Lost doesn't hit artifacts. Go for the Throat doesn't hit artifacts. What was the other one? There was... like Destroy Evil, and I can't remember. As I was playing the game, people, it just lined up, just artifacts in general line up against a lot of the removal very nicely right now in Standard. A lot of the removal that is seeing play, like Blue-White Control, not being able to hit artifacts with Get Lost is rough, and that's why that deck plays a bunch of Marches. But March of Otherworldly Light is not great when you've got to pay 5 mana to kill, a crappy, or 4 mana to kill a 3/2 or 3 mana spider or whatever. It's just super inefficient. So basically, I think artifacts could be in a good position right now as long as it's doing a powerful enough thing. Now, this Azorius Artifacts deck, can we look at the list? I'm looking for it, but there's only 2 players playing it and I can't find it. What is it doing? It's playing Simulacrum Synthesizer.
It is.
And it's trying to go
playing
off
cards like Braided Net, which help you tap down creatures and then draw a bajillion cards.
Braided Net. Wow.
It does have a Wrath effect in Unstable Glyph Bridge.
Oh, it does have that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. The particular deck that the folks at the Pro Tour are playing 4 of these. And it's from Ixalan.
It does have Glyph Bridge. Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is what enters the battlefield if you cast it. For each player, choose a creature with power 2 or less that player controls, then destroy all other creatures except creatures chosen this way. So it will never kill any of your creatures outside of golems, or constructs rather, that are created off of the synthesizer, because it doesn't kill your Thran Spider.
Right.
And it also then crafts with an artifact to flip to the other side, which basically is a 5/3 flyer that says if your opponent casts a spell, they can't attack you. And if they attack you, they can't cast a spell. So it's like an ultimate tax card, sort of, on this side with a flyer that is a clock, because it's a 5/3.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the card that I love the most out of this deck, and it's kind of hard to hate any of them that are in here, is 3 Steps Ahead, which is the counterspell from Thunder Junction. At worst, it's a cancel. So it's 1 blue for original cost, and you got to pay 2 mana more to counter a spell, 3 mana more to create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, or 2 mana more to draw 2, discard a card. So for 3, 4, 5, 6 mana, this card counters a spell and creates a copy of your synthesizer.
Yeah,
or
that's busted.
at instant speed, creates a copy of your unstable glyph bridge to wrath the board. This
very
card
nice.
is so versatile, and this card is being played as like a 4 of in the blue-white control deck for the simple fact that you can counter a spell, draw 2, discard a card, which is sort of like a mini
Cryptic Command, dude. It feels like Cryptic Command. It's like counter draw. I used to do that so often with Cryptic Command. Counter draw. Just the free counter spell is so good. But yeah. Oh, sorry.
Of note, if you copy the glyph bridge, it doesn't trigger. You have to have cast it.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, when I was playing blue red artifacts, I was jamming the 3 Steps Ahead because there's also a lot of synergy with discarding cards. In this deck, for example, you've got 4 Fabrication Foundry. This brings artifacts back from your graveyard, so tossing an artifact and bringing back later is always good. You have no qualms about doing that. But the problem is I was playing with Cityscape Leveler and Skitterbeam Battalion, and like you just said, Ham, all these cards say, when this enters the battlefield, comma, if you cast it. Like, oh god, I missed that so many times. Like, they all have to be cast.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
So it was not the most amazing, but it doesn't matter. 3 Steps Ahead,
It's
even
still
copying
great.
a construct token that's like an 8/8 is ridiculous. Make an instant speed 8/8 on your end step. Now it's lethal and kill them.
Right.
It's like stuff like that.
Making a copy of the synthesizer. The first synthesizer sees the new one come in and then rocks out another construct. It's like, what?
When I was playing with synthesizer, I had 1 synthesizer and I was pretty impressed. I played synthesizer, I played a Thran Spider, holy crap, it made a 5/5. And then I had 2. And as soon as you have 2 synthesizer, the fact that they're not legendary is so ridiculous. It snowballs so fast, like puts like 20 power on the battlefield in like 1 shot, like easily. I was holy crap. No wonder this is a $60 card in real life.
You want to watch Arena Chug get 2 of those down and then drop a Skitterbeam Battalion, man. Those triggers, it takes a minute to resolve.
Exactly that. And so there's a Jeskai version of this deck that does exactly that, right? Play Skitterbeam Battalion, and you get a bunch of constructs and a bunch of haste.
Skitterbeam's so dumb with that card. Yeah,
it's silly.
It's so good. But anyway, the deck looks good. There are no Shatterstorms in Standard right now. Nobody's blowing up all the artifacts, so you're pretty safe.
No,
and like I said,
1 card that I think is a threat.
Oh, is there a Shatterstorm?
One actual one, but 2. There's a second.
Brotherhood's End.
So more than 1.
Okay, right.
There's Brotherhood's End here for 3 or less. But then there is Fade from History. That is 2 double green. That just gives them a bear afterwards.
Fade. Does that exile all artifacts?
People
artifacts.
Destroy all artifacts and enchantments, and people have forgotten about this card. I don't think
totally forgot.
Nobody runs this. I have yet to see this in Standard, even once. Which is kind of wild because out of sideboards, you'd think there would be an opportunity there.
Against what? Green white enchantments disappeared a long time ago. There is no artifacts deck. I mean, this but this isn't like this is a random rogue deck people are throwing together. So there's no reason to run this. Even Brotherhood's End, which is a much more like justifiable card to run in your deck because it's a sweeper. A lot of decks aren't playing this card right now. Like I don't see many at all. Like the aggro decks that are the red decks and the aggro decks aren't going to play a sweeper. So there's a couple of braids maybe running around. That doesn't spot removal's not going to stop this artifact deck.
Playing a braid. I mean, I know Esper's the best deck, but I don't think enough people are playing a braid.
It's an amazing removal spell. It's so one of the best, flexible removal spell. But it just right now, back when Grixis, before Fable got banned, like tons of braids, Bankbuster you had to deal with and all this other stuff. But now, ever since Bankbuster disappeared, a braid fell off and just sees no play. Teamer Fireballs put it in the sideboard basically just to kill unlicensed turtles, and that was it. But I think spot removal against this kind of artifact deck, this artifact, a lot of the creatures and artifacts are making other artifacts, and that makes it very rough for spot removal. I was going to say the other thing I really like about this deck is Spring-loaded Saw Blades is so sweet. Having a removal spell that can turn into a threat, and the other one you mentioned, the Glyph Bridge that also turns into a threat. The more of these craft cards that are in the deck, the more the power level goes up so quickly, because I think people don't realize that these are like doing 2 roles in one. Multiple cards like this are doing this, and that is so good. It's so hard to trade. Like, it's a 2-for-1 when they kill your creature and then get to turn this into a creature. That's hard to like beat on value, you know, a lot of times for a lot of decks. So I do love this kind of deck. I hope it ends up doing well. It's still playing, I don't know, kind of a weird, it's a control deck that doesn't even have a great late game. Like, it's a value snowball deck, right? You don't have this big power spike at the top end, like, you know, Atraxa and whatever else, herd migration type thing. Yeah,
well, so we were talking about clean answers to artifacts, and Carlo, were you going to mention structural assault by chance? Was that
no? I was going to talk about Anzrag's Rampage from Karlov Manor.
Oh, okay.
So it is also 3 in double red, and it destroys all of the artifacts that you don't control. And then you get to exile cards and put a creature onto the battlefield.
Like, these cards are so bad. Like, imagine you can't put a card like this in your sideboard just for one rogue deck that you might play against.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't do anything against anybody else at all.
If you're doing some kind of
mole god on the art, what do you mean?
But it's not bad. And look at him; he's angry.
Oh, big time.
Yeah,
we can't even play Anzrag in the current standard. Let me play my Anzrag's Rampage.
No, an effectively unblockable 8/4 that wins you the game on the spot isn't good enough for standard. It's not on the spot. You have to attack.
When Karlov Manor first came out, Anzrag was like the #1 dollar value card because everybody was so scared of it, and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna play against this in standard. It's unbeatable," and it's not in one singular deck. That's
holy cow! What were they thinking? This card is so cracked. It's like.
Even when we talked about it on the podcast, I was saying, like, it just dies to go for the throat, and it costs twice as much mana. Like, you can't. It's got no ETB.
And I absolutely was running this in fight rigging day 1, and it got smoked all
it just dies.
Day. It was so bad.
It's a lightning rod, right?
It's wild, too, because, like, everything you're doing... Like, from a kind of classical Magic perspective, the amount of power that you're putting out there for how much mana, it all should be good, but it just lines up incredibly poorly against what's out there right now.
Well, and it's a byproduct of 11 set standard as well. We have so many good answers, so many good graveyard hate cards and wraths and countermat and you name it. Like, whatever you're trying to do, there's a good answer to whatever you're doing. So whatever you're doing has to be either super resilient or get you value immediately or what have you. And this just doesn't do any of that stuff. And it's just too expensive. When my Thalia dies to a go for the throat, I'm happy because they paid 3 mana. When my Slick Shots, whatever show off dies, they still paid more mana than me or whatever. Like, that's great. But when you're paying 4 mana and they're trading their 2 mana card for that, that's not good enough. So anyway, but that leads us to the fact that people aren't playing a lot of Shatterstorms and stuff. So maybe the artifact deck is good. We'll see. But there's a couple wild ones. Mono Blue Cauldron combo. We do have infinite combos in standard. People keep forgetting. Now, we don't have to talk about this deck. I just thought it was interesting. This deck popped up in the last Pro Tour as well. Yeah. There was 1 or 2 players playing it. That was right after Wilds of Eldraine had come out. And Soul Cauldron dropped and the Fairy dropped. And of course, people put that combo together where you're using the Sleepy Fairy, whatever it's called, and this, and the Kami to make infinite. Now, this person's doing infinite combo here. Yeah, this is Mono Blue Cauldron. Another interesting combo deck. Only 1 person playing it in the Pro Tour. I'm curious if it's going to do well, but that's old news. I want to talk about Mono Black Bloodletter. I wrote an article about this when the set first got spoiled. I was mistaken about this card. I asked you on the Jank, but I thought you were able to do this combo. But like, I thought it was easier to do, but it's still a great combo. It's just not as good as I thought. Where Bloodletter of Akhlazot's, triple black 1 mana, 4 mana, vampire demon flying 2/4, but makes your opponent lose double the life that they lost this turn, which when combined with Rush of Dread, kills them from any life total. It doesn't matter how high their life is, which is great against decks like Temur Fireball that end up on 50 life or whatever, and it doesn't matter. You could just one-shot, bang. I don't care how much, you're dead. However, it's, mono black, so it's because you're very heavy black here, so you're not able to play a ton of great sideboard cards. Like, restricting yourself to one color is rough for a lot of reasons, but it's consistent. You never get your mana screwed, and you get to play a lot of utility lands. So I was wondering if this deck was actually going to be something. Well, one person registered it, but let me see if I can find the list here. Okay, Mono Black Bloodletter. So it's rocking, the combo, of course, of Bloodletter of Outlaws plus the Rush of Dread, but it's also playing some sweet new cards. It's got Kervek the Punisher, which is actually a really sweet black card. In a mono black deck, this can get you a lot of cards, a lot of value.
Yeah.
You're losing a lot of life, but... and then Giso... Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, Kervek is probably one of my favorite cards out of Thunder Junction.
Yeah.
It, like Marquesa, is, like, the value engine card that I want to play in this color. Granted, it only lets you... So Kervek, the Punisher, for those of you who aren't sure what this card is, it's 1 and double black for a 3/3 legendary. Whenever you commit a crime, you exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You can cast the copy, you gotta pay the mana, and you lose 2 life if you cast it. So, Kervek, when I mean it's a value engine, it doesn't do anything on turn 3 besides be the 3/3. But on, like, turn 4, let's say you've used a removal spell previous to this, it lets you get 2 removal spells if you really want. Because if your removal spells that you've cast are some number of cut down or long goodbye or go for the throat, which this deck plays, you then recast that out of the yard. Or let's say you are having this card in play late game and you cast a cut down, but you have your Bloodletter of Outlaws that was removed and you have 4 mana up. You can recast this Bloodletter from the yard and get your creature back out there. Or a bat in the yard that your opponent's killed. You get another bat.
A black card is such a rare word to see on a card. The word any card, not even type, not even anything. And the fact that this is not Snapcaster, all these kind of effects, whether it's Snapcaster, whether it's, there's a bunch of them, flashback effects and all this stuff, they exile the card from the yard and then you get to cast it. But with Kervek, I can go for the throat, your guy. And then next turn, they play another creature, and I just cast the same Go for the Throat again next turn. I'll plus the Liana, discard a card, Go for the Throat, your guy. Or trigger Tiny Bones Joins Up, an incredible enchantment to trigger crime in this deck. The 1 mana Tiny Bones Joins Up, ETBs, they discard a card, legendary enchantment. But whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, any number of target players lose a life and mill a card. So just being able to get a trigger, cast the same, Go for the Throat like 3 times over 3 turns, just again and again and again is so ridiculous.
It does exile the card. Wait,
what? It does?
It does.
Oh, exile? Oh, I misread.
You exile the black card from your graveyard, and then you copy it, and you can cast the copy. And that's how they get. That's how they let you do creatures, because you're casting a copy of a spell, so the creature's entering as a token. And so if it dies, it
I'm an idiot.
No, you're fine.
I read the last part.
I just wanted to, before folks get the actually comments going. Although if you want to drop a comment, please do. But that's
drop a comment. Damien's an idiot. I didn't see the exile. I thought it was because from your card and copy. It's the copying part that threw me off. I thought you were just copying the card and casting it. I was like, whoa.
Oh, if only. Yeah.
So it ignores timing restrictions too.
It does.
Well, yeah.
So you do it in the moment.
Be able to get a creature. You could do it.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so you cut down your opponent's thing on their turn, you get the Bloodletter out, and then it can block right away, or whatever the case may be.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great. This card is
Kervek's
this card's
great.
silly. I'm also realizing now my brewer brain is tingling. Every now and then, in the back of my head, I'll just get a little moment where it's like, did you think about this interaction? It's like, oh, I hadn't, but thanks, brain. Kervek the Punisher, you lose life as you're doing those things. Is there a synergy with this in the new Rowan, perhaps, for some really silly things? Because Rowan, when you can tap Rowan and all of your black or red spells cost X less, where X is the amount of life you've lost this turn. I'm wondering if there's some synergy there, or maybe some kind of spell slinger Rakdos shell that could take advantage of these two to like silly effect. I don't know, but more to come on that. I don't know. Maybe with like Hell to Pay and things like that. I don't know. Maybe there's something. Probably not. But
interesting.
Anyway, I'll noodle on that.
There's a couple other new cards here. Like Vadimir is another one that is popping up. I'm kind of surprised to see a legendary 2-drop have three copies of this card in the deck. Like normally legendary, like it has to be a lightning rod for you want to play that many legendaries.
Oh, the first one's gonna die. Yeah.
is this guy that good? Like he's a 2-mana 2/2. He grows very gradually.
Once
It
a turn.
only triggers once each turn, so yeah, he's growing pretty slowly. But then he does get very scary. I mean, if you ever get him to a 6/6, he's got Menace and Lifelink, which is powerful. But I mean, your 2/2 is probably just dying to everything early. Is this the best 2-drop? Is it kind of what I'm wondering? Like mono black, we've got so many options here.
If you got Tiny Bones joins up on 1 into this on 2, it's
Okay.
just a 3/3 for 2. That is only going to go up.
That's true.
And
Right.
you know, there are a lot of cards out there right now that are crimes that people aren't even necessarily thinking of. Like Hearse and Agatha Soul Cauldron are two of like phenomenal crime engines that people don't really. I don't think enough people are respecting those.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
I've had a couple of brews where I put Agatha Soul Cauldron in, even when I didn't have any activated abilities on my creatures. Like I don't care. I just want to touch your graveyard on your turn to trigger all my once per turn crime stuff.
Do a little something,
yeah, that's great. So it triggers once per turn, but that's including your turn or your opponent's turn. So you could get 2 triggers if you're, you know, using instant speed removal and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
the value snowball, like it's a must answer threat at 2. If you need a must answer threat at 2, it does the job quite nicely. Yep.
I that is a nice little curve with Tiny Bones joins up. I guess that's why, because legendary, I'm like, why? And then the legendary being very, that's why it's relevant.
Yeah, I
that
think
makes
that's
sense.
the idea.
And the last one is Gisa. Gisa on the top end. This is another card that I thought was going to be really good, but I haven't seen a ton of it. Has it been as good as people thought it was going to be? Have you guys played with much Gisa in your black decks, or?
I remember playing during the streamer event, and I had a mono black like skeletons deck playing the case, the case on 2, and then Corpse of the Lost on 3, and playing up to Gisa on 5, which then would pump the skeletons.
Right.
And I think Gisa is a house if unanswered. The downside is, you know, having so many wrath spells by the time you get to play in this on 5. If you're curving out and your opponent hasn't wrathed your board, they lose. And then when they wrath you, you lose. So
Yeah.
I like Gisa. There were some Dimir control builds in this Pro Tour. I don't have the list in front of me, but that were playing Gisa as like the win condition on 5. Especially if you didn't show it to your opponent, I guess, or only played them in the sideboard. It was relevant. Though I think Aklazat's is just probably the better win condition than this in the main deck. But there were some folks trying out Gisa.
Yeah, I could see it out of the sideboard once they take out their removal against you and you bring in something like this. Because it just puts so much power onto the battlefield. And I guess in this mono black deck, they're playing 2 at the top end here. I guess they just have so many ways to commit crimes that, they can trigger this on their turn and the opponent's turn probably very easily. And that just takes 1 turn of triggering to put lethal almost on the battlefield, right?
Oh,
your zombies are 3/3s. Yeah.
If you have Tiny Bones joins up and you just slam Gisa, you're getting 10 power creatures on the board. So it's like, you know, good luck.
Yeah,
exactly. Like even recovering after a wrath, they wrath your board of 3 or 4 creatures, and then Gisa just makes an entire new board for you in one card.
Yeah.
So interesting card. I haven't seen it on camera yet. I want to see this black deck on camera. And again, it's a mid-range black deck. It can kill you by beating you up with stuff. It's got Deep Cavern Bat to disrupt you. No idea why we're only playing 3 Deep Cavern Bat in the list I'm looking at. That seems like one of the best cards. But then, you know, it can also just kill you out of nowhere with this combo. Rush of Dread and with a Bloodletter in play, and that's it. You've got 2 Insatiable Avarice to go find your pieces if you're missing a Bloodletter or a Rush or whatever. So kind of sweet. I like these kind of decks that have a good functional game plan, and then also this oops I win in the back pocket. They can just pull out, and you know, I can just top deck a Rush of Dread and I win. Like you're at 50 life, I don't care. You still lose. It's kind of crazy.
And the Insatiable Avarice in this deck is just so versatile. Like if you just want to pay 3 mana to draw cards and lose life, like that's probably fine. Or to search up your combo piece. You know, you could very early play this Avarice to draw the card, lose life, have Karavek out, and then later commit a crime, then cast this off Karavek to go get your other win condition in case you think you're getting wrathed.
Or they're at 10 life and you attack with your Bloodletter, do 4, and then I make you draw 3 cards, lose 6, and I win. Like that's crazy. Just targeting your opponent for 3 mana, deal 6. That's quite a bit of reach there. Reach out and touch someone with that and they die.
And one thing I do want to point out about this mono black deck is there's no Shieldred to be found in the whole 75.
Yeah, kind of funny.
Wow.
With,
So
with
you think that
Bloodletter.
Shieldred is like the best or one of the best black cards that you can play, and that's true.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
But for this deck to not even play one anywhere,
I mean, especially with Bloodletter of Aklizots, that's just deal 4 every turn. Every time they draw deal 4. Like, isn't that crazy with Shouldred in play and Bloodletter?
no. So
No, does it
Shieldred
not?
would make them lose life on their turn, so they wouldn't get the extra trigger off Bloodletter.
Oh, during your turn. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, during your turn. That's probably why. Because Bloodletter and Shouldred both being 4 mana is kind of like they're butting heads there in that 4-drop slot. So that makes sense. If you're playing 4 Bloodletter, you can't play 8 4-drops in this deck or whatever.
Right.
7, 8.
Yeah.
Okay, it's only on your turn. Yeah. I've not
still,
played
not
with Bloodletter very
even-
much, but
Not even a 1 of or 2, because like just to
Yeah.
have the possibility of
In the
just
sideboard, maybe?
throwing down Children and just grinding for the finish. Like we've all seen that happen so many times. You know,
Mhm.
that's an interesting choice. You know, but
yeah, cool
Yeah.
deck. I want to see it on camera, but we haven't seen it yet. But anyway, were there any other
good
lists
stuff.
you guys wanted to pull out and talk about? Those are kind of the more interesting ones I think I saw. But
you know, it's funny. So the time that I spent watching the Pro Tour yesterday was mostly during the draft portion. And I did see one moment that I want to call out. I forget the player's name, and I'm so sorry. I'm bummed about this. But I did see a Spinewoods Armadillo hit the graveyard and then get reanimated with Reanimate. And
the
that was
actual reanimate.
yeah, an actual reanimate on a Spinewoods Armadillo was one of the coolest limited moments I've seen in a long time. So
Yeah.
This card is unbeatable.
So it's a good one.
It's
yeah.
unbeatable in draft.
so yeah.
You mean reanimate or armadillo? They're both pretty damn.
I mean,
good.
both are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
But,
Spinewoods
yeah.
it's funny. I have Spinewoods Armadillo in actually one of my current standard brews, and it like consistently overperforms. It is shockingly good. Yeah, 7/7 reach
I don't know.
3 for 6.
One
And you
card.
can-
If we're talking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's
You wanna read it?
7/7 reach with ward 3, so it's like it's not quite hexproof, but it's close you're gonna find these days. And for 1 and a green, you can discard it and search your library for a basic land, gain 3 life. So it's like Herd Migration, except instead of like a domain payoff and you get a big board, it's just a big chonky boy. That's
Yeah.
like it's but you do get that channel ability. So anyway, I think
Well,
this card's underrated. I love it.
If
And-
we're
yeah.
talking about large green creatures here, I am shocked that the Rattleworm is not showing up at all at the Pro Tour. I thought when they spoiled that, I was like, wow, this looks like one of the top contenders. I thought it was one of my top 3 green cards from the new set that I thought I was
Yeah.
going to see play. But no, like you think a 4-mana 6/5 trample with no drawback, and it also can randomly get flash. Oh, and it's also just like a 2-mana like backdoor. Go get the arid. Whatever it's called, like the bounce land, the Karoo land that they printed.
Right.
No, nobody's messing with it. I was kind of like, okay, interesting. I thought this might show up, but
Yeah.
It is a
not good
surprise.
enough, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of
And the
wild.
Mhm.
Just the idea
The
that
other-
a 6/5 trample for 4 isn't good enough by today's standards.
Yeah.
Isn't that like I don't know, as experienced Magic players, can we all just stop to appreciate how nuts that is?
Yeah, power creep's a hell of a drug. We were talking
Sure
about
is, man.
Vansrag, same thing, right?
Yep.
But the last deck, sorry, we did gloss over it, but I wanted to go back. I know, Carlo, you love Golgari mid range. What do you think this set has done for Golgari? I see people playing it. All I see that's changed is Caustic Bronco. I think I maybe one Kervek in a couple of lists.
Yeah.
Pillage the Bog, or
So
Yeah.
Reed Duke was playing a deck list with Caustic Bronco yesterday, right?
Right.
We were able to see that on camera, which is so Reed Duke, by the way. Like
I
wanting
know,
to play
yeah.
Dark Confidant effects plus Liliana the
Green
Veil
Black
in their
Rock.
constructed deck at a Pro Tour. Like
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Hey, he's
But
consistent. I'll give him
Reed
that.
Duke signs off on a card within the Jund kind of color pie, I trust him. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
probably knows.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it good enough to like? Because there's like again, you've got Esper midrange and Domain and all these other powerful decks you could play here. Him saying, no, I think Golgari, the grind, like again, we're talking another mid-range deck here, not a huge power spike on the top end. Like the biggest threats they play are just a couple Archfiend of the Dross and Sholdred. But just value, main deck Duress. I'm looking at Matt Sperling's list. Triple Duress in the main deck. I think him and Reed are on the same team, so I imagine it's
Yeah.
a similar list. Triple Duress in the main. They're playing a Shoot the Sheriff randomly, but the removal looks pretty standard. One Pillage the Bog, which you mentioned earlier. I guess it's just for value here. It seems much better in the Fireball deck, the Nissa Analyst deck, where you're trying to find these big, huge, swingy things at the top end. But I don't know. I guess it's good enough. Mosswood Dread Knight crews the Bronco, or saddles the Bronco. Kervek, I guess Glissa does.
Yeah.
One Tranquil Frillback.
I think Glissa is a very, very strong card. I'm a Glissa fan.
Yeah.
In every possible green-black deck that you could play.
I agree. And
yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's so much value. I'm just a fan of extra value cards. I think Glissa is that extra value card. You can't attack into it with anything when it hits.
I know.
You can attack through everything, and you are playing the worst case scenario from that card is you are drawing a card and losing a life. Everything else is a better option on this card if you have the ability to play it. Right, so whether removing counters from like a Planeswalker or blowing up a Leyline binding, you know, it has all of those abilities on it, and you know, playing the way Reed has their Golgari deck built, it's not necessarily. It doesn't have to be a Bronco I Gotcha card, right? Like it's just a 2-mana value 2/2 creature. That hopefully you don't flip like your 4-drop off the top, but if I take 3 life for finding a Glissa to cast on turn 3, it's not a big deal.
Totally.
You know, and I like that the card is versatile in that particular build.
I like it too, and I think you're right. In this deck, unlike the Orzhov deck, it's not a combo card, right? Here it's a value card, and that makes sense. It fits the curve. It does kind of what you want to do. I agree with everything you said about Glissa. Glissa's, that's a lightning rod. That's one of those cards that just must be answered. But you've got a lot of built-in life gain. Like you're losing a lot of life here. You've got the Bronco. You've got Kervek. You know, I guess Preacher is making you lose a life. Is it not? Yeah, when it draws.
Yeah, when you draw.
Yeah. And but you're gaining it back with you know, you've got the one Frillback, you've got a couple of Sholdred, but you've also got Gix's Command, which a lot of people forget can just gain you a large chunk of life out of nowhere. That is really the best card in this deck against Esper midrange. Gix's Command is very good against them, and I'm not surprised to see this deck. Players like Reed Duke or Matt Sperling or like really good players pick up this deck and say, yeah, you know what? We're just going to kind of pre-board against what we know everybody else is doing, which is Esper midrange. We're going to put 3 duress in the main. We're going to put a couple of Gix's commands and try and like outvalue them basically. And I like it. I haven't seen it on camera do its thing yet. But I find it interesting. I didn't think we would see much Golgari midrange, but to see like really high level players pick it up and say, yeah, like, I think the Bronco kind of gave it a little bump here. Here's one Kervek. We've got enough card advantage now that we can run with some of these other decks. Seems interesting. Anyway, Hostile Investigator in the sideboard. Another spicy number there. I don't know if we've talked about Hostile Investigator. It's a 4-mana, 1 black, 3 colorless ogre rogue detective creature. It's a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent discards a card. And when one or more players discard, you investigate. So again, another card advantage engine. You see a bunch of these kind of like standalone, you know, Preacher of the Schism and Kervek and Mosswood, Caustic Bronco. All these cards end up drawing you a bunch of cards kind of indirectly. The clue is kind of drawing you. I think it's sweet. I like seeing this kind of stuff. Harvester of Misery, another new card in the sideboard as a 1/of, probably against Boros aggro. This deck probably has a pretty good match against Boros aggro, I would think. But I don't know, with the changes they've made, because you got a lot of built-in life gain. Even your creature land, you know, gains you life or makes food essentially. So interesting deck. I wonder if they're gonna put up good results in day 2 here with this. But
definitely interesting.
Anyway, that's it. I have nothing else here. I haven't. That's all I wanted to talk about. But
no, we haven't talked about Hostile Investigator yet, but I think that is a card I think we're going to see a lot more of.
For sure.
And, you know, as time goes forward. You know, it's a 4/3 for 4 with no relevant keywords, but the second ability is it includes when you discard cards. It includes with the ETB. It includes any channel effect, any cycling. All of that triggers this thing. Right. So yeah, I think it's quite good. Also, there are just multiple ways to get, you know, card advantage. You can draw cards, or you can have your opponent discard cards. You know, both
right.
work. And
Lily into this is super annoying. Like,
that's nuts. Yeah,
make 2 clues. They discard 2 cards, and you discard a card, but you're drawing cards, so you're you're breaking that symmetry from Liliana.
Yeah, and there's actually there's an alchemy card that is similar to this, if I recall correctly. The name is escaping me right now. But it forces your opponents to discard. It's a Death Touch vampire. It forces your opponent to discard. The name of it is escaping me right now. So, but in any event, that card has every single time I've seen it when I've been playing in Historic or whatever, every single time it has hit harder than I expected to. It's just every time I'm like, dang, that's really good. And it's just, this is effectively that in paper. And
it's kind of like a 3-for-1, right? You're making them discard, you're going up a card, and you're getting a body. That's pretty good. And then it works well with other discard, like you said.
And it's a detective even. So if you have if you're doing some weird detective thing after murders, guess what? More detective support. Who knew? I did not expect that. But here we have it.
Doesn't die to shoot the sheriff either, because it's a rogue.
It is indeed.
There's that. But
you love to see it.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I will see what happens in day 2 here. I'm going to be watching a little bit of the Pro Tour today. Are you guys going to be able to watch day 2 at all?
I'll be keeping an eye on it.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
Definitely.
And then top 8 tomorrow. So next week's podcast, we're going to have a lot to talk about, I imagine, once the dust settles and we get to see
heck yeah,
who did what. It'll be interesting. But anyway, if there's nothing else you guys want to add, I have a suggestion.
Ooh.
I'd like to close each episode with maybe a question. What's your number 1 X in Magic kind of card? I bring this up because I got into a discussion with my channel about this, and as I'm watching the Pro Tour, for me, when I see these players play different decks, the one thing that jumps out to me in every single deck, regardless of archetype, regardless of what colors they're playing, it doesn't matter, is the basic lands. Which basic lands are they playing? And I'm like, well, there's only one correct choice in my mind. However, seeing all the basic lands that people like to play, I love seeing this in real life Magic. And when we get to see the pros, now that they're playing in paper again, it's hilarious to talk. Oh my God. Like, one guy was playing Teamer Fireball and 17 basic lands in that deck. All of them were mismatched. White border, black border, beta island. Like, I was just like, oh my God. Some people just want to see the world burn, you know? And my chat was like, why do you care? And I'm like, lands are the window to the soul. Lands are how you express yourself in your Magic decks. So I say for every episode, we end with a question. Today, I want to ask you guys, what is your number 1 go-to basic land? If you were going to go to the Pro Tour and you were going to be on a feature match and you were just like, this is the final form of my deck that I'm going to show off or whatever. Yeah. What is your go-to basic land? Ham. What? I know I'm putting you guys on the spot. No chance to think about this. What do you normally use? You probably know already.
I have a couple answers for that. And I think it partially depends on
one answer. No, it has to be one. What is the number 1?
All right. So I just recently did something that I haven't done before, right? So I'm getting more and more prepared to play more limited in person, which is something that hasn't been a big part of my deal. So I created like a set of lands that I carry with me to bring, pre-sleeved for my limited decks.
Oh, sure.
And so like I've recently been presented with this question of, okay, if I'm going to carry 10 of all basic lands around with me, what are they going to be? And I went with, just go with me on this one, and I can already hear people getting ready to unsubscribe when I say this.
Don't do that.
8th edition white borders. Okay. I love them so much. And 8th edition came out the very first year that I started. Like, the 7th edition starter kit was on the shelves at like your, at Kmart's and whatnot when I was first starting, right? Or your KB Toys. I don't know if anyone else bought Magic cards at a KB Toys. I see you. So there's something about 8th edition that just warms my soul. I do want to give a shout out to the original Kamigawa lands as well. Those are just gorgeous. So that's kind of my second choice. But
interesting.
I love white border because they get a rise out of people. Either people
Oh,
don't
yeah.
notice and they don't care, or
That-
people do notice and they just and
Yeah.
like I get in their head a little bit.
People
and
are
I
so
enjoy
weird
that.
with that. I don't mind white border. I dislike the mismatched more than anything. That's
Sure.
what triggers me. White
Yeah.
and black border and everything in the same deck. I'm very confused boner about this card because I love John Avon. He's the best artist for Magic Lands, but then there's the white border, so I'm like, I don't know what to think right now. But okay,
And
I
that's the
like
other
it.
thing.
8th
The
edition.
8th edition arts are all gorgeous. Like John Avon did a
Yeah.
ton of them. They're
Yeah,
beautiful.
he's incredible.
And so yeah, the whiteboard is a
Yeah.
little gumpy, but you gotta admit the art's gorgeous.
Cool.
For
And for
sure.
nostalgia is a great reason to choose your land.
Yes.
So good
So
answer.
that's-
Carlo,
yeah.
how
Listen,
about you? What's your
8th
number
edition
one?
was when I started playing Magic too, so you know,
Nice.
sign me up for all the white border basics. But what I've been playing since they've come out from Ixalan are the full art Jurassic Park basics.
Ooh.
And
Oh.
I have to play them on the Dino side. So not that
What?
side of that one hand, but the
Oh,
other
I didn't even
side.
realize.
Uh,
They're
Let's go.
double-sided. I didn't even
they
know
are
that.
all double-sided full art basics.
So,
And
oh
there
wow.
is, I think, one for each basic land type. So all the forests look like that.
Cool.
Particularly, when I was playing in the standard RCQ season, and I was playing Red Black Ramp. I was playing the mountains and the swamps, and
So-
they are the greatest
Oh,
because
heck yeah.
the swamps on the back of that
Wow.
one is like some big dino coming to blow up all the boats, and
sick,
the
I
red
love
one
it.
is just like a dino with a meteor like falling in the background, which is
I-
also pretty great.
I didn't even know these existed in that flip. I didn't know they were flip lands like this, like on Arena and whatever. They don't like. I never play in real life anymore. That's hilarious. I
Yeah.
did not. So are you serious right now? You're not trolling me. This is your go-to if you were going to the Pro Tour next week. Like this is what you would rock on camera in your Pro Tour deck.
Facts. Mm-hmm.
Damn, nice.
Sick.
Respect.
100%.
I love it.
I am a
I'm
dino
so-
enjoyer. You will see me frequently playing dinos over on my stream, y'all. I 100% am rocking the dino basic lands.
I love it.
Yeah, they live
So-
again. Life finds a way.
100%. So Damien, you have feelings on this. You have, and I like the idea of ending a stream with or ending the show
Yeah,
with a
we'll
question,
change. Let's change it every week. We'll change it.
Yeah,
But
of
for
course,
today, basic
absolutely.
lands.
I'm 100% on board. So what are your go-to? Yeah.
I'm way more boring than you guys. I don't have dual-sided cards as my lands or any like the nostalgia factor. For me, the only correct choice always is full art unhinged basic lands. They look, for me, there's a few caveats, like what makes a land beautiful, a land card. It has to look like land. Some of the other sets, like Innistrad, promo lands and stuff, it was like the castle with people walking through the foreground, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, or those dinosaur cards, like, they're cool, but they don't look like lands to me. Yeah, it's a dino blowing up a boat. Like, that's a
Right.
swamp? So, for me, I want maximum artage on my card. Maximum art. That's why I don't like the unglued basics. I don't like it was the same reason the Amonkhet masterpieces were the most reviled, because they took up so much card real estate with the frame and all the other crap. John Avon lands, just the word, great. That's the basic land word. No other weird text or anything. No fancy borders or whatever. Minimize like the smallest border possible. Full art, and of course John Avon. The forest. Even if I didn't see the trees, I would know it's a forest. It's
100%.
green. Like when I see these lands on the battlefield, they're red and blue and green, and they just look like
Yeah.
they're so easy to identify. These are my number one. And I saw we were watching, and I was like, yeah, this is. And then we saw Shota play these lands, and I was like, yes. And then Brian
yeah.
Kibler was playing these basics, and I was like, yeah, see, you guys are all wrong. The pros,
These
the
guys
Hall of
get it.
Famers are playing. Yeah, but to each their own. And we had a
Nice.
big discussion about lands, and okay, that's sweet. So I didn't even know that about you guys. Okay,
The
next
rules.
week we'll
Yeah.
have a better question. I'm gonna come up with something different, or whoever's on the cast.
Yeah, no,
But,
we
there you
definitely
go.
will. I like this. This is fun, and I think
And
being
let
put on
us
the spot is
know.
half the fun. So I'm
Yeah,
here for it.
maybe next week one of you guys come up with it, and don't tell the other people
You
or
get-
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. Yeah.
And in the comments,
I love it.
hey, let us know what you
Yes.
think. Tell us what your basic lands are. What is your number one? Because that is how you, I think, personalize your deck the most often. Most often, this is how people, it's not commander, and you're putting yourself into your deck by choosing your commander and colors. This is like every constructed deck. This is how the pros kind of show, hey, this is who I am or whatever. It's kind of sweet. So let us know what you think. What your best basic
Yeah.
lands
What are your lands? What are your go-tos? Yeah, we definitely want to know. That'd be awesome. And while you're down there, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, if you wouldn't mind pressing the subscribe button, that helps tremendously. We would definitely appreciate it. And if you're listening in various podcatcher apps, follow, like, leave a 5-star review, whatever it is on that platform. The engagement helps tremendously. And yes, we definitely do want to know your basic land and what other topics would you like to hear us throw out in the future, or if you have a fun question that you'd like to hear, in a future episode.
Great one.
Let us know.
Send us a question. That's even better. Then we'll all
keep an eye on that stuff. Yep, absolutely,
Yeah.
and we're looking forward to it. So yes, thank you so much. Before we go, let's go around the horn. Let people know where they can find you, what they can find when they get there, and go do some plugs. So Damien, let's start with you. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitch 5-6 days a week. Monday to Saturday, we stream Magic every single day, Monday to Friday. Lots of Standard. I want to play other formats. Hopefully we get Pioneer soon. I know we talked about that, but playing lots of Magic on stream. I'm also on YouTube, Damien F16, F16 on Twitch and YouTube, dropping daily content on YouTube as well. Lots of different games. And we are also writing articles. Myself, Ham, I know Numbskull, another Team MagicJank member. If you want to check out mtgcircle.com, you can find my articles there. And that's it. How about you, Carlo?
Yeah, so you can find me at cfavretto_jr on the internet. I typically stream on Twitch at least 4 days a week, focusing on Standard content, a lot of community brews that I climb the ladder with every season. But sometimes I get to play my own decks too, so that's great. We do a little metagame Monday series where I give the community a chance to pick from like 3 top winning decks throughout the weekend before, and then we play that for the entirety of stream. I will be starting some Magic the Gathering online content starting up this week. The MTGO creator program does start, so you will catch me at least 1 day a week playing some Magic online, also Standard based, so probably jamming some leagues and stuff like that. And then also you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the same handle, Twitter, everything. All cfavretto_jr. I'm going to be trying to catch up on making some like little YouTube deck techs coming up if you want to check that out. And I will be traveling next month to DreamHack Dallas. That will be the next event I'm going to be at. So if any of you are going to be there, make sure to check me out. Once they go ahead and publish the streamer schedule, because I'll have like a 2-hour streamer slot to stream live from DreamHack. I will be doing a fundraising stream for Stack Up, which is an organization that benefits veterans' mental health through gaming. So that whole 2-hour stream will be a charity stream. So if you want to engage in that, make sure to follow me. That's going to be while we're at DreamHack over that weekend. Plus, I'll do a fundraising stream on May 25th. So make sure to stop by for that.
Awesome. That's great to hear, man. I'm jealous. DreamHack. Yeah. Ooh. I live 2 hours from the Pro Tour in Seattle that's happening right now, but there's no Magic Con at this Pro Tour. So there's like no reason for anybody to go. So I'm like, damn it. That's the one Pro Tour I could go to.
And I actually heard a whole bunch of people say apparently the actual convention hall isn't even open to the public for this one. So if you want to just stand around and like just be present, you're not allowed. Yeah. Which is kind of a bummer.
Which sucks. Yeah. Anyway, that's awesome, man. I hope you have a great time.
Well, yeah, rock on. And yeah, and I'm Hammox42 on all the places, streaming on Twitch 5 days a week, and also putting out YouTube content when I get to it. It's mostly shorts these days, which you can also see on Instagram and TikTok and all that happy stuff. So, yeah, so gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out. This has been a killer discussion. Always a pleasure. And yeah, again, folks at home, we're looking forward to hearing about your favorite basic lands. And yeah, until next time, take it easy, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.